Chapter 488. Shui Wuxiang's trick was very simple, but to see through it, one didn't rely on strength, but attentiveness. Ying Bailu saw through Shui Wuxiang's trick faster than Chu Xiu and the others, because his heart was on Yan Fian. Shui Wuxiang's imitation ability was very strong. From the moment everyone entered this large tomb, Shui Wuxiang had been secretly observing, imitating those people's actions, words, and details. But in such a short time, Shui Wuxiang had to control so many doppelgangers, so his imitation was definitely not perfect. Shi Jiuling's accusation that Shui Wuxiang was suppressed to the point of becoming stupid was really an unjust accusation. So some inconsistencies in the details were quickly discovered by Ying Bailu, and Ying Bailu was very ruthless. He didn't even give Shui Wuxiang a chance to speak, and directly blew him up. To him, Yan Fian was someone he adored, a fairy in his heart, and he wouldn't allow anyone to blaspheme her. This thing actually dared to pretend to be Yan Fian to trick him, it was simply courting death. But at this time, Ying Bailu didn't choose to smash the wall like Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. He felt that something was wrong with that pool, so he went back to study it, wanting to see which direction Yan Fian went. Ying Bailu noticed something was wrong, but Yan Fian didn't. Other than Ying Bailu, there were only other female disciples of the Yu Palace following Yan Fian. It was very easy for Shui Wuxiang to imitate Ying Bailu. Although Ying Bailu loved Yan Fian, he wasn't a talkative person, so Shui Wuxiang only needed to imitate Ying Bailu, constantly looking at Yan Fian with a deep gaze, and that was enough. As for the other female disciples, it was even easier to imitate. Yan Fian's prestige among the female disciples of the Yu Palace was quite high, and the others all followed her lead. Naturally, whatever she said, the others would do, so it wasn't troublesome. So Yan Fian followed the tunnel, and under Shui Wuxiang's camouflage, she was directly led to the secret room where Shi Jiuling was. The moment she stepped into the secret room, Yan Fian immediately felt that something was wrong. She was just about to say something when the dozen or so Yu Palace female disciples behind her and Ying Bailu all transformed into Shui Wuxiang's appearance. The dozen or so doppelgangers attacked Yan Fian from behind. Shui Wuxiang's doppelgangers were actually very weak. The Yu maiden sword in Yan Fian's hands emitted a piercingly cold light, and as the sword light spat out, those doppelgangers were all chopped into pieces. But at this moment, the blood coffin opened, and Shi Jiuling's withered hands danced. Boundless lines of blood enveloped him, and he rushed towards Yan Fian. Those blood threads were extremely tough. Even with Yan Fian's power, he was actually unable to shatter them. Although Shi Jiuling was just a dried-up corpse, his movements were stiff and slow, his entire body seemed to be indestructible, forcefully resisting Yan Fian's Yu maiden sword as if it was nothing. After exchanging over 10 moves, Yan Fian had already fallen into a dangerous situation. And in the passageway not far from the secret room, Lu Fengxian was currently swinging his halberd and smashing it wildly in a certain direction. But suddenly, Lu Fengxian's ears twitched. There seemed to be the sound of metal clashing coming from a certain direction. In this large tomb, a martial artist's perception was indeed suppressed, but their 6 senses were still there. There was no problem with Lu Fengxian's hearing. After hesitating for a moment, Lu Fengxian directly changed direction and smashed in the direction of the sound. In this large tomb, other than Xiao Liandong, Lu Fengxian did not have any enemies. So no matter who was fighting in front, Lu Fengxian was prepared to save them. But if the person in front was really Xiao Liandong, Lu Fengxian did not mind making a sneak attack. Although Lu Fengxian was a kind and generous person, he was not the kind of person who repaid evil with good. Xiao Liandong had instructed his disciple to threaten Feng Buping. At that time, he hated Lu Fengxian to the core. If it was not for Chu Xiu's forceful intervention, he did not know how the matter would have been resolved. When Lu Fengxian smashed open the wall, he saw the scene of Shi Jiuling forcing Yan Fian to the extreme. Lu Fengxian did not have any enmity with the Yu Maiden Palace. Although Chu Xiu had some friction with the Yu Maiden Palace, in Lu Fengxian's opinion, it was better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Since the person in front of him was not Xiao Liandong, then Lu Fengxian did not think too much and directly made a move to save him. The halberd in his hand burst out with a dazzling crimson light. The halberd slashed down like a crimson moon in the sky, with astonishing power. With a loud bang, although Lu Fengxian's halberd failed to defeat Shi Jiuling, it left a thick white mark on his body. It even directly blasted Shi Jiuling away, causing him to smash into the wall. The force was so great that the entire wall almost collapsed. At this time, Shi Jiuling did not have time to curse before he saw Lu Fengxian's appearance. He could not help but exclaim, "Lord Wenho." But as soon as his voice came out, Shi Jiuling knew that something was wrong. The person in front of him was not Lord Wenho, but the young man that Shui Wuxiang said was 80% similar to Lord Wenho when he was young. Shi Jiuling was just about to say something, but Lu Fengxian had already brandished his halberd and rushed over. His power was boundless and unparalleled. Shi Jiuling's blood net could stop Yan Fian, but under Lu Fengxian's halberd, it shattered inch by inch. Shi Jiuling was like a ball, and although Lu Fengxian's halberd couldn't cut him into pieces, he was sent flying again and again. In the end, even Shi Jiuling could not bear it. If he continued, his bones would be blown apart. Shui Wuxiang. Thou still want to continue watching? Shi Jiuling shouted angrily. At this time, a stream of black water suddenly emerged in the secret room, and Shui Wuxiang's body emerged from it. He said helplessly, "My avatar is not here, what's the use of making a move? Forget it, if I can't block it, then retreat first." As his voice fell, the black water that Shui Wuxiang had transformed into directly enveloped Shi Jiuling and his blood coffin. The black water actually strangely sank the two into the ground. Shi Jiuling was still in a suppressed state, and could only move freely around the blood coffin. Without the blood coffin, he would completely become a corpse. Lu Fengxian still wanted to make a move, but he discovered that those two fellows had completely disappeared. Only then did Lu Fengxian stop and ask Yan Fian, "Miss Yan, are you all right?" Yan Fian shook her head and said, "I'm fine, many thanks to young Master Lu for saving me." Looking at Lu Fengxian, Yan Fian also sighed in her heart. Her feeling was right, she was indeed inferior to Lu Fengxian. Even though her ranking on the Longhu leaderboard was higher than LV Fengxian's, part of the reason why she was on the leaderboard was because of her fame. In terms of actual combat strength, she was much weaker than LV Fengxian. Throwing away those useless emotions, Yan Fian asked Lu Fengxian, "Young Master Lu, do you know what these two things are?" Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, "I don't know either, but I previously killed a clone of the black water that had condensed into a human form." From what he said, what is suppressed in this large tomb should be the ancient demon god Lu Wenho. Then, they should be Lu Wenho's subordinates in the past. As for why they haven't died after 10,000 years, and even survived from the ancient Great Calamity until now, I don't know. However, this place is very dangerous. From the moment we entered here, I'm afraid that we have already been targeted. These people even want to use our bodies to resurrect Lu Wenho. I don't know what kind of evil plan they have. I have also been separated from Brother Chu and the others. Looking at you now, Miss Yan, it should be the same, right? Yan Fian nodded, and her expression was somewhat ugly as she said, "I have also been separated from the other junior sisters." Although she was safe now, the fate of the other female disciples of the Yu Palace was unknown. This also made Yan Fian somewhat worried. It should be known that the Yu Palace did not have many disciples to begin with. If more than 10 of them died here, it would definitely be a huge blow to the Yu Palace. Lu Fengxian comforted her, "There will always be a way. Miss Yan, you don't have to be so worried. Maybe they discovered something was wrong in advance?" Yan Fian nodded. It was useless to worry now. However, fortunately, she had met Lu Fengxian, so at this moment, she just happened to follow Lu Fengxian in a direction. It was still Lu Fengxian who led the way. Meanwhile, on Chu Xiu's side, he had continuously demolished dozens of walls. Finally, he passed through the passageway and arrived at a spacious bronze palace. However, at the very center of the palace, there was an abnormally terrifying existence chained up. It was a skeleton whose entire body was burning with raging flames. He wore black armor, but the armor was already tattered and stained with blood. For some reason, the armor still seemed cold in the raging flames. The skeleton's 4 limbs and waist were chained up by huge chains. However, the chains on his limbs had already been broken, but they were still wrapped around his wrists and legs. Only the chains on his waist were still tightly chained up to his body, preventing him from taking a step. At this moment, there were already dozens of people in the palace. Most of them were warriors of the Dong family, but there were also some who were independent warriors. At this moment, 2 thick chains burning with raging flames were rapidly circling around them, like a cage imprisoning them. Those 2 chains were the ones under the skeleton's feet. When it saw Chu Xiu coming in, the chains danced and just happened to envelop Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu frowned. He raised the heavenly demon dance in his hand and slashed down with a fierce demonic aura. However, it didn't leave a single mark on the chains and was directly repelled. One of the Dong family's warriors at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm smiled bitterly and said, "Official Chu, don't try. It's useless. These chains were used by the ancient experts to imprison this monster. Now, they have become the monster's weapons. I reckon that apart from divine weapons, no one can cut them. If we want to get out, we can only work on the monster itself. As long as we can get close to it and disrupt its inertia of swinging the chains, we will have hope of escaping." Chapter 489. In the past, the demon god Lu Wenho had countless powerhouses under his command. In addition to suppressing Lu Wenho, this big tomb also suppressed Lu Wenho's subordinates. Shui Wuxiang was one of them, and so was this burning skeleton. However, compared to Shui Wuxiang, this skeleton was much stronger. The battle prowess it displayed was at the unity of the world boundary. Moreover, with the addition of the chains in its hands, the strength it displayed had already reached the peak of the unity of the world boundary. It was exceptionally difficult to deal with. Looking at the burning skeleton, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You are also one of Lu Wenho's subordinates. Do you know Shui Wuxiang?" The burning skeleton looked up to the sky and laughed. Although its voice was hoarse, it still sounded like a thunderclap. "You also know that fellow Shui Wuxiang? Since you can appear here, it proves that Shui Wuxiang, that self-proclaimed genius idiot, has failed. But it doesn't matter if he failed, I am still here. I am Lord Marquis Wen's first general, Yan Qishao. Junior, your body is very suitable for Lord Marquis Wen. I don't want to destroy your body. Quickly surrender and you will suffer less." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Why are you all saying the same thing? Are you people really like this? After being suppressed for tens of thousands of years, have you become stupid? Courting death." The iron chains on Yan Qishao's arms danced as they smashed towards Chu Xiu with incomparably powerful might. Chu Xiu brandished the heavenly demon dance in his hand and slashed continuously, directly blasting away the iron chains. However, he still couldn't do anything to the other party. At this time, the Dong family's expert at the unity of the world boundary shouted from behind Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, you are the strongest among us. Now we will cover you and try to get you close to that monster. Only then will we have a way to break out of this situation." Among the people present, the Dong family's expert didn't have any objections because he was the leader. However, the other non-Dong family experts were somewhat hesitant. The strength of that monster's attack was very strong. If one was swept by those chains, they would either die or be injured. However, if they did not do so, they would be slowly tortured to death by this monster. Therefore, these people also gritted their teeth and agreed. They scattered on both sides of Chu Xiu, helping Chu Xiu resist the iron chain. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, rushed towards Yan Qishao with the devil blade in his hand. He slashed out 3 blades of Avici, and monstrous devil qi erupted. The pitch-black devil qi blade light directly enveloped Yan Qishao. Yan Qishao didn't dodge at all. He laughed loudly and said, "You dare call this little bit of devil energy a demonic saber? In the past, I was able to withstand the 7 ultimate demon blade slash with my physical body. Your strength is not even enough to tickle me." Chu Xiu's 3 blades of Avici slashed at Yan Qishao's body. Although Yan Qishao was forced to retreat a few steps, it only left a shallow mark on his skeleton. It simply couldn't destroy him. At his peak, Yan Qishao was a supreme expert who cultivated a body-refining cultivation method. He had already tempered his body to the point that it was comparable to a magic weapon. Even if his body had decayed and only his skeleton was left, his defensive power was still there. After Chu Xiu's blade missed, Yan Qishao condensed flames all over his body. A giant flame blade slashed towards Chu Xiu. Its power was also extraordinary. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. He held the Dugu seal in his hand, and a Gang Qi shield rose up. He was as immovable as a mountain. A loud bang resounded, and flames swirled around. However, Chu Xiu was unharmed. Stepping forward, Chu Xiu formed the great VajraWill seal in his hand. One seal after another, Buddha's light flashed and shattered the flames. Yan Qishao's figure was forced to retreat step by step. Yan Qishao said angrily, "Buddhist martial arts. You are actually a Buddhist and devil dual cultivator." Chu Xiu seemed to have discovered that Buddhist martial arts seemed to be more effective against LV Wenho's subordinates. At this time, under Chu Xiu's crazy attacks, Yan Qishao couldn't control the iron chains at the same time. The 2 iron chains on his legs, which were used to imprison everyone, had already slowed down a little. Just when everyone thought that they would be able to take down this monster in one fell swoop, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the Dong family's warrior who had been leading the people to cover Chu Xiu. The long sword in his hand suddenly burst out with a dazzling light and stabbed towards Chu Xiu's heart from the back. No one present had expected this scene. Even the people from the Dong family were the same. However, at this critical moment, astral energy suddenly erupted from Chu Xiu's body. It was as if he had already expected this to happen. He formed the inner binding seal with his hand and instantly raised his speed to the limit. He dodged to the side, causing the Dong family cultivator's sword to miss. Seeing that Chu Xiu was able to dodge at such a critical moment, the Dong family's warrior suddenly revealed a look of disbelief. Could it be that Chu Xiu had been guarding against him all this time? I clearly didn't reveal any flaws. How did he see that something was wrong? In fact, the Dong family's warrior was wrong. Chu Xiu wasn't guarding against him. It was Chu Xiu who had never trusted strangers like them. Right now, there were not many people in the world of martial artists who could make Chu Xiu feel at ease and hand over his back to others. When he worked together with strangers to fight against enemies, Chu Xiu would instinctively save some of his energy to defend against them. Doing so might be a little paranoid, and he wouldn't be able to display his strength to the fullest in battle. However, it was also the safest, just like what was happening now. Following the sneak attack of the Dong family's warrior, Chu Xiu's attack was also interrupted. This finally allowed Yan Qishao to breathe a sigh of relief. He stood to the side and sneered as he watched the show. Chu Xiu calmly looked at the Dong family's warrior and said indifferently, "Tell me, who are you? I don't have any enmity with your Dong family." Chu Xiu could see that the Dong family's warrior before him was definitely not Shui Wuxiang in disguise. He was also using the Dong family's cultivation technique. The Dong family's warrior sneered and said, "You don't have any enmity with the Dong family, but you have enmity with me. My name is Dong Xiangping. Do you remember who I am?" Chu Xiu frowned and said, Dong Xiangyi of the River East's 5 heroes? Dong Xiangping gnashed his teeth and said, "That's him. Dong Xiangyi is my younger brother. However, compared to me, who is already old and has no ambition, my younger brother is still young." He also wanted to fight for the position of the family head, but he failed and left in a huff. The others in the Dong family don't care about this failure. Only I, his older brother, know that he has always been in Eastern Qi, safe and sound. He even became one of the River East's 5 heroes and has a good reputation in the Eastern Qi martial world. Originally, I wanted to find an opportunity to bring him back when he was older and more open-minded. However, I didn't expect that my younger brother would actually die in your hands. Chu Xiu rubbed his head. Just as he expected, what he wished for came true. Previously, he had thought that he didn't have any enmity with the Dong family and that the only person he had contact with was Dong Xiangyi. However, Dong Xiangyi had already left the Dong family and didn't die directly in his hands. So, no one should have come to make trouble for him. Now it seemed that good things never came true. There's one thing you have to be clear about. Dong Xiangyi didn't die in my hands, Chu Xiu said calmly. Dong Xiangping directly waved his hand and said coldly, "You can fool others with your words, but do you think you can fool me? It was you, Chu Xiu, who used despicable means to provoke internal strife among the River East's 5 heroes and made them kill each other. I've known about this for a long time, but I never told anyone about it, nor did I show any intention of revenge. You're the torture officer of the Guanzhong torture room and a well-known talent on the Longhu list. However, I'm just an ordinary warrior of the Dong family who relied on my age and experience to get here. It's as difficult as ascending to heaven for me to kill you. However, I didn't expect that you would walk right into the trap this time and take the initiative to attend the opening ceremony of the Dong family. It's obvious that God is avenging me." Chu Xiu stretched out a finger and shook it, saying, "It's a pity that you misunderstood God's intention. God didn't avenge you, but wanted you to know what despair is, so that you would give up the idea of revenge. Unfortunately, you didn't grasp the opportunity. It's as difficult as ascending to heaven for you to kill me, no matter where you are." Dong Xiangping sneered, "Not me, but us." Dong Xiangping turned to the warriors of the Dong family and said coldly, "Chu Xiu killed a disciple of the Dong family, so he must pay for this with his blood. Don't worry, if anything happens, I'll bear it alone after the opening ceremony." The warriors of the Dong family exchanged glances and stood behind Dong Xiangping one after another. They were a family, and Dong Xiangping also had a high status in the Dong family, so they had no reason to stand on Chu Xiu's side. Dong Xiangping looked at the rogue cultivators who hadn't expressed their opinion, took out a token, and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, don't you want to escape? Help me kill Chu Xiu. Even without Chu Xiu, I still have a trump card to help you escape. Our Dong family has been holding the opening ceremony for so many years, so of course, we're fully prepared. With this token, I can contact the Patriarch to save us. Although it can only be used once, it's enough for the Patriarch to find our location. As long as we kill Chu Xiu, I'll use this token to ask the Patriarch to help us. Otherwise, if all of you stay here and watch the show, then at worst, Chu Xiu and I will fight to the death, and if we're both taken advantage of by this monster, don't even think of leaving alive." Hearing Dong Xiangping's words, seeing that there were so many people in the Dong clan, and then seeing that Chu Xiu was the only one on his side, the independent cultivators hesitated for a moment before standing behind Dong Xiangping. Looking at Chu Xiu, Dong Xiangping sneered, "I can't kill you alone, but with so many people, can I kill you?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Useless chickens and stray dogs, can't even withstand a single blow. Don't use your pitiful cultivation to figure out my strength. Moreover, you're still in danger, but you still want to kill me at all costs. Hatred has completely overwhelmed your reason. The people behind you are also idiots. They actually followed a guy who has lost his reason. Are they tired of living?" Chapter 490. Chu Xiu's alliance with Dong Xiangping and the others had turned into an internal struggle, which caused Yan Qishao to watch the show from the sidelines. Earlier, Shui Wuxiang had sent a doppelganger to inform him that this group of youngsters was somewhat difficult to deal with, but Yan Qishao didn't care. However, from the series of exchanges with Chu Xiu just now, he could see that this person in front of him was truly difficult to deal with. Therefore, he wasn't in a hurry to act at this time, but rather watched from the sidelines to see how things would develop. Dong Xiangping really hated Chu Xiu to the core, but he didn't think that he had lost his reason because of hatred. In fact, if Chu Xiu hadn't come just now, Dong Xiangping would have been forced to use the token to seek help from the Dong family's patriarch. However, after seeing Chu Xiu's arrival, Dong Xiangping planned everything in a very short period of time. This time, he must make Chu Xiu die without a burial place. With a wave of Dong Xiangping's hand, the Dong family's cultivators immediately surrounded Chu Xiu. The other rogue cultivators hesitated for a moment, but then they also followed suit. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked around. He suddenly said to Yan Qishao, "How about we make a deal?" Yan Qishao grinned and said, "You juniors are fighting amongst yourselves, and now you want to drag me down with you?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I don't want you to help me. I can deal with this group of useless chickens and pottery dogs by myself. You know my strength. Even if I'm alone, you won't be able to keep me here. I don't know why you want to kill them, but it's obvious that you need these people's lives. You don't need to do anything to kill them, I'll do it. You just need to make sure they don't escape. As for whether you can keep me here after these idiots are dead, we can fight again." With Chu Xiu's current strength, he wasn't being arrogant, but he really didn't put Dong Xiangping and the others in his eyes. However, if the members of the Dong clan escaped, it would also be troublesome. For an aristocratic family like the Dong family, they would definitely protect their own people. They wouldn't ask whether it was Chu Xiu who provoked the Dong family first or the Dong family who provoked Chu Xiu first. All they knew was that Chu Xiu had killed a member of the Dong family. That was it. Therefore, in order to avoid trouble, Chu Xiu didn't want to let any of the Dong family's warriors escape. In any case, there were dangers lurking in every corner of this large tomb. He could just push all the blame onto Yan Qishao. The eyes of Yan Qishao's skull shone brightly. He laughed and said, "Isn't it simple? Even if you didn't say anything, I didn't plan on letting anyone go." Dong Xiangping's expression changed. He snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, you're still as despicable as ever. How dare you cooperate with this monster?" The heavenly demon dance was slowly withdrawn by Chu Xiu, who said lightly, "Despicable? Isn't it despicable for you to sneak attack me from behind? When a crow stands on a pig's back, there's no need to say who's despicable. TSK, this analogy seems a little inappropriate. But it doesn't matter. You can't avenge your brother. But I can send you to him." As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiu's figure rushed towards Dong Xiangping at high speed. The heavenly demon dance in his hand blossomed with a sharp demon chi saber light. As Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, the incomparably violent demon chi directly surged out as if the gates of hell had opened. "Let's attack together," Dong Xiangping shouted in a stern voice. He and the dozens of Dong family's martial artists behind him attacked together. Astral chis of the same origin condensed together. Their might was incomparably powerful, and directly converged into a huge astral chi's longsword. Then, with a powerful chi movement, it met Chu Xiu's blade. With a loud bang, the gang chi's longsword shattered, but Chu Xiu's saber that was surging with demon chi was also shattered. Dong Xiangping's eyes immediately lit up. He knew that even if Chu Xiu was in the top 5 of the Longhu leaderboard, no matter how strong his combat power was, he was still not a martial Dao master. He would still be at a disadvantage if he fought one against many. However, when the demon chi dissipated, what greeted him was an extremely dazzling Buddhist light. With the fearless seal in his hand, Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by dazzling Buddhist light, and his dharma was solemn. Behind him, a Vairocana phantom merged with Chu Xiu's figure. When his palm fell, Buddhist light shone brightly, illuminating the world. Sun-switching technique. In fact, speaking of which, Chu Xiu still lied to Master Tam Yuan. He had promised Master Tam Yuan that he wouldn't use the sun-switching technique to kill people, but since it was a martial art, how could it not kill people? Under the effect of the sun-switching technique, Chu Xiu's palm directly blasted dozens of Dong family's warriors back a step. Some of the weaker ones even vomited blood and were injured on the spot. Dong Xiangping's formation just now was instantly smashed by Chu Xiu. His eyes were filled with horror. Only at this moment did he understand how terrifying the young elites on the Longhu leaderboard were. Chu Xiu's strength did not lie in one aspect, but in the fact that Chu Xiu could be so strong that he could make you despair even though you were obviously in the same realm as him. The sun-switching technique had the power to steal the fortune of heaven and earth and change the sun. However, that state seemed to be burning. Chu Xiu still couldn't completely control it, so he only struck out with his palm and didn't continue using the sun-switching technique. Chu Xiu's speed exploded to the extreme in an instant. As his saber slashed down, 3 sabers of Avicii slashed down. The 3 sabers merged into one, and the saber intent also merged into one. The longsword in Dong Xiangping's hand shattered with a loud bang, and he was also injured by the saber light. A huge saber wound was left on his chest, and blood kept spurting out. Before Dong Xiangping could spit out a single word, Chu Xiu slashed down with his saber once more. This time, the other martial artists of the Dong family wanted to stop him, but Chu Xiu's left hand formed the wisdom fist seal. As his gang energy domain bloomed, the martial artists of the Dong family seemed to be in slow motion, and they were imprisoned within it. They could only watch as Chu Xiu's saber completely cut off Dong Xiangping's head. The headless corpse fell to the ground, and Dong Xiangping's head also fell to the ground with a soft thud. There was still a look of unwillingness in his eyes. He wanted to say something, but unfortunately, he would never have the chance to do so. In fact, Dong Xiangping was definitely a character. When he first saw Chu Xiu, he clearly knew that the person in front of him was the murderer of his younger brother. However, he still endured it, and even gave advice, as if he was extremely rational and cooperated with Chu Xiu to defeat Yan Qishao. To be honest, even Chu Xiu didn't suspect him at that time. However, Dong Xiangping's strength was always Dong Xiangping's weakness. Even if he launched a sneak attack, Dong Xiangping still couldn't hurt Chu Xiu. At this time, Chu Xiu also turned his gaze to the other martial artists of the Dong family, and the hearts of those martial artists immediately turned cold. Dong Xiangping actually didn't have a great reputation in the Dong family. He wasn't old, but he wasn't young either. His strength had just stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, and his combat strength wasn't outstanding. However, no matter what, he was still the backbone of the Dong family. If Chu Xiu killed him just like that, how could he possibly leave them alive? This Chu Xiu had probably long since harbored the intention to kill them to keep their mouths shut. The martial artists of the Dong family were indeed from an aristocratic family. They didn't scatter in fear. Instead, they roared, "Let's attack together and kill this Chu Xiu. Otherwise, we won't be able to live." As soon as they finished speaking, the martial artists of the Dong family swarmed toward Chu Xiu. However, what greeted them was a massacre. A one-sided massacre. With one step, Chu Xiu had already entered the selfless killing realm. The blood-refined divine gang had been pushed to the extreme by Chu Xiu. The devil saber was stained with a trace of evil blood red. As the saber slashed down, the devil chi and the blood chi intertwined. Under the powerful force, Chu Xiu was almost invincible. Moreover, he was still in the selfless killing realm. Although his perception was suppressed, in the selfless killing realm, Chu Xiu's 5 senses were enhanced. In a group battle, he was almost invincible. Chu Xiu's figure was like a blood-red storm. Wherever he passed, countless broken limbs and remains were set off. Yan Qishao, who was in the rear, didn't intervene. At this time, the 2 holes on his skull were burning with blue flames, jumping rhythmically, as if he was sizing up Chu Xiu. To be honest, even he was a little surprised by Chu Xiu's murderous nature. The strength of this young man's murderous nature wasn't inferior to theirs. In ancient times, Lv Wenho was unhindered in the world. He wasn't righteous, but he wasn't pure devil either. It was more appropriate to call him evil. In short, these people had followed Lv Wenho for a long time and had offended many people. Some were righteous, and some were demonic. There was even a time when the imperial court of the human world joined forces to kill them. During that time, they couldn't remember how many people they had killed. It was at that time that Lv Wenho's name as the devil god spread all over the world. But now, Chu Xiu's state was very similar to theirs at that time. His murderous nature had already penetrated deep into his bones. In Chu Xiu's eyes, Yan Qishao could only see indifference. He wasn't fierce, but this was the most terrifying thing. In Chu Xiu's eyes, there was no good or evil, right or wrong. There were only people he could kill and people he couldn't kill. He indifferently harvested people's lives without any emotional fluctuations. This state was even more terrifying than some devils who killed for fun. Even if some devils killed for fun, they at least knew that they were killing people. But what about Chu Xiu? For the current him, killing was just a tool, a means. At this time, without Dong Xiangping leading the way, the Dong family's warriors couldn't withstand a single blow. In less than a quarter of an hour, they were all killed by Chu Xiu. There wasn't even a complete corpse in the entire field. It was extremely terrifying. At this time, the other rogue cultivators were already extremely frightened. They wanted to escape, but Yan Qishiao's 2 huge, blazing iron chains were spinning rapidly around the periphery. With their strength, it was impossible for them to break out of the encirclement. When they saw Chu Xiu's blood-red eyes looking at them, the independent martialists completely broke down. Those warriors couldn't help but beg, "Official Chu, let us go. We were forced to attack you. We swear that we will never tell anyone about what happened today." Chu Xiu glanced at those people and put away the long blade in his hand. Just when those people heaved a sigh of relief, Chu Xiu blasted out a punch. Sky extinguishing, earth extinguishing, oblivion killing fist. Chapter 491. Secrets were hard to guarantee. Even a mute could leak the secret. Therefore, Chu Xiu only believed in one thing: the only ones who could keep secrets were the dead. Therefore, even if this group of rogue cultivators had stood on the Dong family side, Chu Xiu would still choose to eliminate them in order to solve the problem. Of course, there was one more witness, Yan Qishao. However, this guy didn't seem to be a person. Who would believe his words? Therefore, under Chu Xiu's annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist, those rogue cultivators were all killed. In less than a quarter of an hour, the entire hall was filled with corpses and flesh. Chu Xiu calmly exited the oblivion killing technique without expending much energy. Yan Qishao took a deep look at Chu Xiu. Of course, the 2 blazing holes on his skull didn't reveal any of his thoughts. If it was in ancient times, Lord Wenho would have been very interested in Chu Xiu based on his personality. Perhaps there would have been one more of the 4 generals under Lord Wenho's command. Looking at Yan Qishao, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "All right, now it's our turn. I want to see if I can shatter your skeleton first, or if you can kill me first." Yan Qishao said in a muffled voice, "I'm done. Thou should leave." With that, Yan Qishao stopped the 2 rapidly spinning chains. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You're done." Yan Qishao snorted and said, "Thou should be the strongest among the youths who entered this place of suppression." However, thou is not the most suitable to be Lord Wenho's reborn body. Fighting with thee is too troublesome. It's better to kill more people and collect blood qi. Yan Qishao was speaking the truth. There were so many people who entered this tomb. It was not worth it to fight to the death with Chu Xiu here. Since he was not confident that he could kill Chu Xiu, he might as well get Chu Xiu out of here as soon as possible. Then, he would wait for the others to enter and kill them to take their qi and blood. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and turned to leave. Yan Qishao didn't have the confidence to kill him. In fact, he also didn't have the confidence to deal with Yan Qishao. After tens of thousands of years of suppression, Yan Qishao's strength had fallen below the martial Dao Grandmaster level. In terms of pure strength, Chu Xiu was actually not afraid of him. However, the other party had refined his skeleton to the point where it was comparable to a divine weapon. Even if Chu Xiu were to make a move, it would be extremely difficult for him to injure him. He could only suppress him with a Buddhist cultivation technique. Rather than wasting time with this guy here, Chu Xiu might as well find Marquis Lu's inheritance as soon as possible. Half an hour after Chu Xiu left, black water gushed out from within the great hall, and Shui Wuxiang's silhouette appeared. Looking at the corpses strewn all over the ground, Shui Wuxiang said in astonishment, "Very efficient." Yan Qishao shook his head and said, "I didn't do it." As he spoke, Yan Qishao told Shui Wuxiang everything that had happened. Shui Wuxiang raised his eyebrows and said, "That kid again?" Among the young people who came in, that guy can be said to be the most difficult to deal with. Why didn't you kill him along the way? If you let him affect Sir Wenho's resurrection plan, wouldn't it be terrible? Yan Qishao snorted coldly and said, "I want to kill him, but don't you see what state I am in now? My physical body has already been destroyed, how do you want me to kill him? It's better to save some energy to kill others and collect some blood." Shui Wuxiang shook his head and said, "Okay, let's put this matter aside for the time being. The three real pellet state martial artists are about to enter the burial place of Sir Wenho. I will first cooperate with Xianjiu to lay out a plan to kill the three martial Dao Grandmasters. Only in the burial place of Sir Wenho can Xianjiu borrow a trace of the aura left by Sir Wenho on Wushuang to kill the enemy. After refining their blood and qi, I estimate that the blood and qi needed to resurrect Sir Wenho can be gathered. Wait, bring these corpses to Shijiuling first." Yan Qishao pointed to the broken corpses on the ground. Shui Wuxiang frowned and said, "Why are they in such a mess?" Yan Qishao snorted and said, "It's not me who killed them. It's that kid who is too ruthless. Anyway, they are all condensing blood and qi. What's the difference between corpses and pieces of corpses?" Shui Wuxiang muttered discontentedly, but he still turned into black water and wrapped all the corpses in it, disappearing. At this time, in a palace in the center of the big tomb, Dong Qikuan and the other three martial Dao Grandmasters and dozens of other martial artists were all in it, but the atmosphere was extremely depressing. The entire hall's layout was extremely simple and crude. It was made entirely out of bronze, and the ground was covered in dense runes. There was not the slightest decoration in the main hall, but the most central area of the main hall was suppressing a bronze coffin. The coffin's top was nailed with 36 long swords, as if to prevent the thing inside from coming out. But even so, there were wisps of black fog constantly coming out of the bronze coffin. The cold aura was extremely terrifying. After all, Dong Qikuan and the others were martial Dao Grandmasters. Their knowledge was far beyond that of ordinary martial artists. The three of them had already recognized that the 36 long swords were the treasure of the true martial sect, the true martial evil vanquishing sword. The true martial evil vanquishing sword was an existence between a precious weapon and a divine weapon. Its material and power were still precious weapons, but the true martial evil vanquishing sword had to be refined with the blood and qi of a true martial sect's martial Dao Grandmaster. It was comparable to the power of a divine weapon when killing demons. Using blood and qi to refine a precious weapon was a kind of irreversible damage to a martial artist. So even in the current true martial sect, not many people were willing to refine the true martial evil vanquishing sword. However, there were 36 true martial evil vanquishing swords nailed on the coffin. One could imagine what kind of ferocious person was being suppressed in it. Apart from the bronze coffin, there was also a huge halberd hanging in the hall. The halberd looked extremely ferocious. The body of the halberd was pitch black and there was a ferocious glass dragon carved on it. Although the crescent blade was silvery white, the edge of the blade was scarlet as if it was dyed with fresh blood. The entire halberd exuded an extremely ferocious aura. It looked extremely terrifying. It even gave people the feeling that it was not a weapon but a ferocious beast. At that moment, the halberd was suspended in mid-air. However, it was not suspended by a rope but a string of Buddha beads. The Buddha beads were engraved with Sanskrit and emitted a wisp of Buddha's light that suppressed the ferocious aura of the halberd. However, even so, it was still very forceful. There were a total of 108 Buddha beads. However, 10 of them were damaged and the Sanskrit runes on them were extremely dim. There was no need to guess such an obvious hint. Dong Chikuan and the others almost instantly guessed who was being suppressed in this big tomb. It turned out to be the demon god Lv Wenho who had dominated the world in ancient times. This discovery made Dong Chikuan tremble uncontrollably. This was because he was excited. Lv Wenho was a legendary existence. Although Dong Chikuan and the others did not know what was in this place, it was obvious that even an item carried by Lv Wenho could be a treasure. Not to mention the 36 true martial evil vanquishing swords that suppressed Lv Wenho's bronze coffin. Although the power within them had been reduced by more than half, there was still an extremely strong power left. There was also the Buddha beads that imprisoned halberd. Although they were also damaged, any one of them could be regarded as a treasure. Moreover, the most precious item was halberd. It was the demon god Lv Wenho's personal weapon, Wushuang. It was in existence at the level of a divine weapon. It could definitely be regarded as a treasure among treasures. Dong Chikuan and the others looked at each other, and a hint of confusion appeared in their eyes. The rule of the opening mountain ceremony was that outsiders could take anything they could, and the things that couldn't be taken away would be left for the Dong clan. In the past, when the Dong clan held the opening mountain ceremony, they would randomly choose a direction to mine. Most of the things they found were mineral resources, and there were only a few relics. Even if there were some relics, the things that outsiders could take away were limited. The majority of the things still belonged to the Dong clan. Therefore, the Dong clan did not feel the pinch. But what about this time? This was the place where the demon god Lv Wenho was suppressed. Any one of them could be treasures. Moreover, the Dong clan was reluctant to part with any of them. It was the same for the other two people. Although this was the opening mountain ceremony of the Dong clan, they had also come to help. Moreover, there were two of them, while there was only one person from the Dong clan. Shouldn't they take more things? Dong Chikuan took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Xiao Liandong, Su Tingyi, you and I are old acquaintances who have been friends for several years. Now that the treasures are in front of us, I don't want to fall out with them. Moreover, this is the place where the ancient demon god Lv Wenho was suppressed. You've been here for so long. You should have noticed that something is wrong. There are still living things in this big tomb. Although they didn't attack us, the other martial artists of the younger generation have suffered a lot. No one knows when the crisis will befall us. Instead of killing each other in front of the treasures, why don't we join forces for the time being and divide the things here equally? Then, we can discuss other things. What do you think?" Xiao Liandong and Su Tingyi were both veteran martial Dao Grand Masters. They had rich experience in the Jianghu. This was indeed not a good place to fight. Therefore, the two of them nodded and agreed with Dong Chikuan's idea. Dong Chikuan said in a deep voice, "In that case, let's get the divine weapon, Wu Shuang, first. LV Wenho must be suppressed in that bronze coffin. I don't know what the consequences will be if we pull out the 36 true martial evil exterminating swords. We'd better play it safe. Just as Dong Qikuan's voice fell, a black fog filled the hall. The black fog seemed to have a mind of its own and actually condensed together, turning into a hazy and blurry human figure that stood in mid-air, its eyes glowing scarlet. Do you think you're worthy of coveting Lord Wenho's divine weapon? You're simply courting death. Chapter 492. The aura of the human figure formed by the black mist was not very powerful. Perhaps he was extremely powerful when he was alive, but to Dong Qikuan and the other two martial Dao masters, he was nothing to be afraid of. Dong Qikuan frowned. What kind of monster are you? Monster? The human figure formed by the black mist let out a strange laugh. The laughter was hoarse and ear-piercing. I'm Xian Jiuyo, one of the 4 generals under Lord Wenho's command. I could easily crush ants like you when I was at my peak. Dong Qikuan said indifferently, it's a pity that you're not at your peak now. You're just an evil monster without a body. How dare you act so presumptuously? Dong Qikuan and the other 2 were martial Dao masters who had experienced great storms. How could they be intimidated by a guy without a body? Even if what the guy said was true and he could kill them easily when he was at his peak, that was then, and now was now. A deep red light blossomed from Xian Jiuyo's eyes as he coldly said, there's no point in arguing. Today, all of you are the food for Lord Wenho's resurrection. All of you should feel honored to be able to witness Lord Wenho's resurrection. With that, the demonic aura around Xian Jiuyo dispersed and a wisp of his aura seeped into the unparalleled relic. In an instant, the halberd emitted a blinding red glow. The glass dragon on the halberd seemed to have come to life. Xian Jiuyo waved his hand and a halberd completely formed by demonic aura appeared in his hand. Although the halberd was completely formed from demonic aura, the ferocious aura on it was extremely terrifying. A casual slash from Xian Jiuyo already possessed the power to shatter the heavens and split the earth. Dong Qikuan slashed with the long sword in his hand. The boundless radiance turned into specks of stars. In the blink of an eye, the stars completely shrouded everything in the hall. Xiao Yendong was not slow either. He slashed out with the blood-colored Miaodao in his hand, and the scarlet blood-colored edge seemed to tear the sky and earth apart. The saber aura of hundreds of meters burst out, and in an instant, Xiao Yendong had slashed out hundreds of times. The saber aura was dense and terrifying. As for the other martial Dao Grandmaster, Su Tingyi, he did not have a weapon. Lightning flashed around his body, and his earth energy turned into endless thunder roars. When he punched, thunder exploded, and he was like a fiend god. His momentum was also terrifying. The power of the 3 martial Dao masters attacking at the same time was truly extraordinary. However, the 3 of them were sent flying by Xian Jiuyo's halberd. They were in an extremely miserable state. Dong Qikuan gritted his teeth and said, no. This halberd is definitely not this strong. This demon is borrowing the aura imprint left by Marquis LV Wenho on halberd. No one knew what level of existence Marquis LV Wenho's unparalleled divine weapon was. However, according to everyone's speculation, Marquis LV Wenho's halberd should be a peak 9th transformation divine weapon, but it had not reached the level of a peerless divine weapon. The reason was very simple. If this halberd was really a peerless divine weapon, even a string of Buddha beads would not be able to suppress it. However, even if it was a 9th transformation divine weapon, it was impossible to suppress them to such an extent by just borrowing some of its aura. However, now that things had come to this, no matter what Xian Jiuyo was holding, they were no longer as confident as before. Even though they were fighting 3 against 1, they were still forced to retreat. They could not fight back at all. At this moment, Dong Qikuan suddenly looked at the Dong family's disciples and shouted, "Find a way to get the Buddha beads on halberd and the true martial evil vanquishing sword on the bronze coffin." As soon as they heard that, the Dong family's cultivators immediately reacted and rushed forward. The other rogue cultivators were stunned for a moment before they also reacted and rushed forward. Now that the three martial Dao masters were fighting the monster, if they did not seize the treasures now, when would they be able to? However, Qiao Liandong and Su Tingyi, who were fighting, glared at Dong Qikuan fiercely. This guy did not abide by the rules. They did not bring so many disciples with them, especially Su Tingyi, who did not even have any disciples. The Dong family's cultivators retreated in time after obtaining the treasures. It did not matter even if they destroyed the seal. In any case, they would get the treasures first, and then the Dong family would have a lot of time to deal with these things. In any case, the place of suppression was here, and it could not fly away. However, Qiao Liandong and Su Tingyi were different. They only had one chance to enter here. If they wanted to enter again, they would probably have to force their way in. Dong Qikuan said indifferently, "Don't misunderstand, the two of you. This is also a way to defeat the enemy. Don't they want to resurrect Marquis Lv Wenho? If my Dong family's disciples destroy the corpse in the bronze coffin in advance, won't the problem be solved?" Qiao Liandong and Su Tingyi cursed inwardly. Only an idiot would believe Dong Qikuan's words. If Marquis Lv Wenho's corpse could be destroyed so easily, would there still be this big tomb? It was not like they had never heard of Marquis Lv Wenho's legend. But now, Xianzhou's side was really anxious, not because they had touched Marquis Lv Wenho's coffin, but because they had touched halberd. Marquis Lv Wenho's coffin was not easy to touch, but although halberd's wushuang was suppressed by the Buddha beads, it was also because of the Buddha beads that a wisp of Marquis Lv Wenho's aura did not dissipate, allowing Xianzhou to borrow it. Once the Buddha beads were gone, although halberd's ferocious might would be completely released, Marquis Lv Wenho's aura would also dissipate. At that time, the wushuang would become a masterless divine weapon, and besides Marquis Lv Wenho, no one would be able to use it. And at this time, black water appeared on the ground, and a blood coffin also emerged. Shi Jiuling climbed out of the blood coffin, and Shui Wuxiang's figure also condensed. Seeing this, Xianzhou couldn't help cursing, "What took you so long?" Shi Jiuling let out a strange laugh, "Don't be in such a hurry, I still need to refine enough blood and qi for Lord Wenho to use. Otherwise, these three old fellows won't be enough." 3 of the 4 generals under Wenho had already arrived. Apart from Yan Qishao, who was imprisoned in the hall and couldn't move, the other 3 had already gathered. Even if Shi Jiuling and Shui Wuxiang only had 2 people left, they could still fight against dozens of Dong family's cultivators, as well as some rogue cultivators. Just as the situation was in a deadlock for a moment, several loud noises suddenly came from the hall. This was the scene that Chu Xiu saw when he smashed the wall. And when he saw Chu Xiu, Shui Wuxiang's face instantly changed. How did this kid come so fast? He had seen Chu Xiu's strength before, and even he couldn't see through it. And at this time, the other side of the wall was also smashed, and Lu Fengxian and Yan Fian's figures also appeared. Seeing these 2 people, Shui Wuxiang immediately felt a headache. The development of the situation had somewhat exceeded his expectations. Chu Xiu and the others had come too fast. Originally, Shui Wuxiang and the others were prepared to deal with Dong Qikuan and the other 2, and after accumulating enough blood and qi, kill Chu Xiu and the others, and then choose a suitable body to be Lord Wenho's resurrection vessel. In the end, they didn't expect that they would come together. When Chu Xiu saw Lu Fengxian and Yan Fian together, he was also slightly surprised. How did these 2 people come together? Lu Fengxian walked over and said, "I just happened to see Miss Yan being besieged by the monsters in the blood coffin, so I took action to save her." Yan Fian nodded towards Chu Xiu, her attitude was somewhat cold. After all, Chu Xiu had a conflict with the Yu Palace. Although the grudges were already settled, Yan Fian definitely wouldn't be too warm towards Chu Xiu. Lu Fengxian looked at the people who were fighting intensely, and asked in puzzlement, "What's going on?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "On one side, they want to snatch the treasure, and on the other, they want to kill people for blood and qi. It's that simple. But now, it's time for us to make a move. Brother Lu, do you see that halberd? That's the 9 Revolutions divine weapon, Peerless, of the past Marquis Lu Wenho. I'll protect you and snatch Peerless. This divine weapon is destined to be prepared for you." At this time, Yan Fian also saw the powerful aura of the divine weapon Peerless. She couldn't help but ask Chu Xiu, "This is the 9 Revolutions divine weapon that belonged to the demonic god Marquis Lu Wenho. You're so willing to give it away?" It wasn't that Yan Fian thought too darkly of people, but she felt that Chu Xiu was a little too generous. That was a legendary 9 Revolutions divine weapon. It was definitely in existence on the level of a treasure. For it, even blood brothers could kill each other, let alone Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "So what if it's a 9 Revolutions divine weapon? I use a saber, not halberd. My martial path is already fixed. If I were to switch to the martial path for a weapon, wouldn't that be neglecting the essentials? And I believe that if it wasn't halberd but a saber that appeared here this time, Brother Lu would also give it to me." Yan Fian frowned, still feeling that something was wrong. She didn't have much contact with Chu Xiu, but her intuition told her that Chu Xiu wasn't such a noble person. In reality, Yan Fian's guess wasn't wrong. Chu Xiu was indeed not generous to this extent. However, the most suitable person for Lu Wenho's inheritance was Lu Fengxian. This unparalleled halberd was also prepared for Lu Fengxian. Even if Chu Xiu forcefully snatched it, he wouldn't be able to use it to its greatest effect. On the contrary, he gave the unparalleled halberd to Lu Fengxian. With the relationship between the two of them, as long as Chu Xiu asked for Lu Fengxian's help, Lu Fengxian definitely wouldn't refuse. There was no need to say which was more worthwhile, an effective dead object or a powerful friend who was willing to go through fire and water for you. Chu Xiu was not Nye Donglu in the original plot. He would lose a friend who was destined to become a powerhouse in the future for the sake of an illusory reputation. Chu Xiu would not do something like throwing away a watermelon while picking up sesame seeds. Lu Fengxian also knew Chu Xiu's personality, so he didn't stand on ceremony with Chu Xiu. He just cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Brother Chu. When we get out, I'll treat you to a drink." A 9 Revolutions divine weapon was certainly not as simple as a drink. However, if Chu Xiu needed him in the future, even if there wasn't even a drink, Lu Fengxian would still come to help. Chapter 493. When Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian joined hands to seize the peerless divine weapon, almost no one present could stop them. When 2 of the top 10 on the Dragon and Tiger list made a move, whether it was the Dong family's martial artists or the rogue cultivators, they could only retreat. Shui Wuxiang and Shi Jiuling were also beaten badly when facing Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. It should be said that these 2 people were originally defeated by Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian. At this time, they couldn't resist the joint attack of the 2 people and retreated step by step. At present, only Yan Fian was qualified to compete with Chu Xiu and the others. However, Yan Fian had just been rescued by Lu Fengxian, so she naturally wouldn't make things difficult for Lu Fengxian. Moreover, the 5 major sword sects only used swords. Halberd was only used to trade in her hands, so it was of little significance to the Yu Palace. Chu Xiu and Lu Fengxian arrived in front of the peerless halberd. Chu Xiu directly slashed out with his saber. In an instant, boundless devil qi erupted and blasted on the Buddhist beads. However, a bright Buddhist light directly melted away Chu Xiu's devil qi, and there was no change. The ancient halberd in Lu Fengxian's hands also swept out horizontally. The scarlet moon shone brightly as a powerful astral chi smashed down, emitting a deafening sound. Although the prayer beads didn't change, they dimmed a little. Chu Xiu seemed to be deep in thought. He put away his saber and formed a seal. His hand formed a great Vajrawill seal, and his power was terrifying. One seal after another, the Buddhist light on the Buddhist beads began to dim at a speed almost visible to the naked eye. The power of the Buddhist beads was indeed very strong, but it was only strong in suppressing the devil chi. It didn't have much resistance against other forces. Finally, with a loud bang, the Buddhist beads scattered violently. Without the imprisonment of the Buddhist beads, Halberd's peerless sword suddenly blossomed with a trace of incomparably fierce sharpness. Xian Jiuyo, who was in the midst of fighting Dong Qikuan's team of 3, immediately grunted. It was as though he had lost his source of power and the speed at which he attacked abruptly slowed down. Xian Jiuyo had borrowed the aura left behind by Lv Wenho on Halberd. However, this aura had already disappeared along with Halberd's seal. Therefore, Xian Jiuyo could no longer casually use this power. Every time he attacked, his strength would weaken a little. If he continued to fight, his strength would be completely exhausted. At this time, Chu Xiu did not care so much. He directly shouted in a low voice, "Seize the divine weapon." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu waved his hand, and more than half of the scattered Buddhist beads flew into his hand. There was still some power left in these Buddhist beads. Although they could no longer be used as Buddhist beads by linking them together, refining them would still allow Chu Xiu's Buddhist sect cultivation method to greatly increase his cultivation. At this time, Lu Fengxian also did not stand on ceremony. He directly grabbed towards Halberd. However, at this time, an extremely fierce aura blossomed above Halberd. It was incomparably sharp like the edge of a blade. Even with Lu Fengxian's cultivation, he was directly blown away by this aura. After all, a 9 revolutions divine weapon was a 9 revolutions divine weapon. Once the seal was lifted, in this world, apart from demon god Lv Wenho, no one else was qualified to make a divine weapon take the initiative to recognize a master. At this time, when the other cultivators saw that Lu Fengxian had failed to obtain the peerless sword, their eyes suddenly lit up and they also flocked towards Halberd. Although they also knew that even Lu Fengxian had failed to obtain the peerless sword in one try, and their hopes were extremely slim, it was still a divine weapon after all. Moreover, it was a legendary 9 revolutions divine weapon. With greed in front of them, they could not help but be tempted. A chaotic battle broke out, and at this time, several people came out from the corridor outside. Among them was Ying Bailu. Seeing Yan Fian here, Ying Bailu immediately walked over and asked with concern, "Miss Yan, are you all right?" Yan Fian shook his head, pointed at Shi Jiuling, and said, "It was more daunting than dangerous. I was tricked into that guy's secret chamber, but at the crucial moment, it was brother Lu Fengxian who saved me." Ying Bailu paused for a moment before saying apologetically, "I was late. I wanted to go back to the pool to see which path you took, but after I got rid of the concealment spell, I found that there were over 100 paths densely packed together, so I didn't have enough time to identify them." Yan Fian sighed and said, "Young Master Ying, you really don't have to be like this. I already told you about the matter between you and me, it is impossible. From the day I joined the Yu Palace, I was destined to be the successor of the Yu Palace, and you are the successor of the Xianxia Ying clan. The rules are here, you and I are destined to be fated, but not fated." Ying Bailu was not angry, nor was he discouraged. He just stood with his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "Fate is determined by the heavens. Unfortunately, I don't believe in the heavens, and I don't believe in fate. In this world, nothing is absolutely predestined. Everyone says that I, Ying Bailu, was born with an auspicious omen, and that I am definitely not an ordinary person. But what does my achievements today have to do with that so-called auspicious omen? A white deer holding a Ganoderma is an auspicious omen, and a dark cloud covering my head means that I am destined to be mediocre for the rest of my life? I, Ing Bailu, have my achievements today not because of an auspicious omen, but because I am Ing Bailu. Martial Dao, cultivation method, zither, chess, calligraphy, art of war, and strategy, Ing Bailu was proficient in all of them. But in this world, there were no geniuses born with knowledge. These were all learned and comprehended by Ing Bailu himself. In fact, Ing Bailu did not like people discussing his birth, because that would erase all his hard work. Just like he said, even if he was born with dark clouds covering his head, he was still Ing Bailu. Yan Fian sighed again. Among the younger generation of the Jianghu, Ing Bailu was really outstanding. Compared to others, Ing Bailu was almost flawless. Compared to Zhong Xian's stubborn personality and Fang Qixiao's unreliability, Ing Bailu's way of dealing with people was magnanimous and smooth, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. His bearing did not lose to those older generation warriors. And compared to Chu Xiu, who was too murderous and had a bad reputation, Ing Bailu's reputation in the Jianghu was also very good. Although he did not like to accumulate fame for himself like Nie Donglu, at least there was no bad side to Ing Bailu. This was Ing Bailu. Although he might not have reached the peak in any aspect, there was no way to find any flaws in him. Of course, infatuation was not a flaw. Unfortunately, as Yan Fian said, they were destined not to be together. She was destined to inherit the Yu palace in the future. What she had to consider now was much more than the other younger generation warriors. At this time, Ing Bailu did not pester Yan Fian. Instead, he turned his attention to the battlefield. Although Ing Bailu was infatuated and always expressed his love for Yan Fian, he would never pester someone to the end, which was disgusting. Seeing Chu Xiu, Lu Fengxian, and the others fighting for the unparalleled divine armament, Ing Bailu's eyes narrowed. He said in a low voice, "Is it the unparalleled divine armament of the ancient demon god Lu Wenho?" Good stuff. Yan Fian paused. She wanted to say something, but Ing Bailu said before she could, "You want to say that halberd is useless to me, and you want me to give it to Lu Fengxian?" Yan Fian hesitated, but she still nodded. She said, "I'm just suggesting that Lu Fengxian is the most suitable for the unparalleled divine armament. Moreover, Chu Xiu is not to be trifled with. Among the younger generation, only you and Fang Qixiao can compete with Chu Xiu. But Fang Qixiao is not here right now. Moreover, he is from Sword King City and has a good relationship with Chu Xiu. He should not participate in the fight. If you fight with Chu Xiu now, it will be a fierce battle. Both sides will only suffer, and it will most likely benefit others." Lu Fengxian had just saved her, so Yan Fian also wanted to return the favor to Lu Fengxian. However, she had also just rejected Ing Bailu. At this time, it was not appropriate for her to beg Ing Bailu not to make a move. Ing Bailu looked at the battlefield, shook his head, and said, "Miss Yan, it is true that I am in love with you. I can find anything you want for you. However, I am still a man. No matter how broad-minded I am, if you ask me to give this opportunity to another man, I will not comply. I have no use for halberd, but that does not mean that the Ing clan does not. The Xiangshui Ing clan's foundation is much deeper than you can imagine. Moreover, I am also a cultivator. Although I do not care much about fame and fortune, it does not mean that I do not have the desire to excel. Chu Xiu has surpassed me on the Longhu list. I will not be so bored as to fight with him just because of the changes in Wind-Sweeping Towers list. However, since there is a chance now, I do not mind fighting with him. I want to see how strong Chu Xiu, whom Wind-Sweeping Tower thinks has surpassed me, is." After he finished speaking, Ing Bailu took a step forward. His figure was like a swimming dragon, leaping over a distance of more than 30 meters and entering the chaotic battlefield. Behind him, Yan Fian's eyes flashed with a strange light. At this moment, she finally understood that Ing Bailu was in love with her. However, Ying Bailu was not just the Ying Bailu who had been chasing after her and trying to curry favor with her. He was also the pinnacle figure among the young talents of this generation of martial arts. He was the unparalleled, young master peerless, Ying Bailu. At this moment, in the battlefield, Chu Xiu slashed out with his saber. Demonic chi surged and roared into the heavens and earth as he faced the itinerant cultivators who were fighting for halberd. The might of the Tao of Avicii's 3 saber strikes made the hearts of the itinerant cultivators tremble. Apart from martial artists who were also at the oneness of heaven and man realm, almost everyone else was killed by Chu Xiu's saber strike. At this moment, a dragon's roar rang out. Black astral energy condensed into a dragon's claw and grabbed onto Chu Xiu's saber strike. With a loud bang, it was crushed. Chu Xiu looked up and saw Ying Bailu's black robe fluttering in the astral energy. The black astral energy around his body condensed into the shape of a black dragon that coiled behind him. The dragon looked majestic. Ying Bailu himself stood straight, and his artistic conception was actually compatible with the black dragon behind him, giving off a feeling of incomparable harmony. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Brother Ying, are you interested in halberd as well? I thought you didn't use any weapons." Ying Bailu said indifferently, "I don't use weapons, but that doesn't mean the other seniors of the Ying clan don't use experts like halberd. After all, Peerless is a 9-revolution divine weapon, and it was the weapon of the devil god Lv Wenho. It's normal for me to be tempted. Brother Chu, I don't care much about your ranking on the Longhu leaderboard, but since there's a chance, I'd like to fight you. I want to see if those people from Wind-Sweeping Tower are right." Chapter 494. Among the top 5 experts on the Longhu list, Chu Xiu had fought with Fang Qishao and Zhong Xian before. If Chu Xiu were to fight with Fang Qishao now, the outcome would be unknown. Fang Qishao's karma sword principle was very strong. Last time, Chu Xiu had fought with Fang Qishao on Floating Jade Mountain. At that time, Fang Qishao had definitely not used his full strength. Moreover, with Fang Qishao's strength, Chu Xiu believed that his real trump card was definitely not as simple as a simple karma sword principle. As for Zhong Xian, with Chu Xiu's current strength, he also admitted that he was indeed not a match for Zhong Xian. This was a gap in strength, which could not be made up for the time being except for accumulating strength through bitter cultivation. As for Ying Bailu, his reputation in the Jianghu was not inferior to Zhong Xian and Fang Qishao. The reason why he was ranked behind Zhong Xian and Fang Qishao was that he had fought less. Chu Xiu did not underestimate his enemy. In his eyes, Ying Bailu was definitely the kind of enemy that must be treated with caution. Chu Xiu slowly drew out the heavenly demon dance. Wherever the long saber pointed, a turbulent demon chi surged. Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned red, and he had entered the selfless killing realm. As the saber slashed down, with demon chi as the foundation and evil chi as the blade, a powerful chi suddenly erupted. Demon chi drifted throughout the hall, causing the expressions of the experts who had been fighting with Chu Xiu for halberd to suddenly change. This was Chu Xiu's true state of attack. If Chu Xiu had used this state just now, they would not have been able to leave many alive under Chu Xiu's hands. Ying Bailu's eyes lit up when he saw Chu Xiu's attack. Ever since Ying Bailu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, he rarely fought with others. Because of this, his ranking on the Longhu leaderboard had been lowered by Wind-Sweeping Tower and given to Chu Xiu. Ying Bailu was also a martial artist. Although he did not have a competitive heart, it did not mean that he did not want to fight. The reason why Ying Bailu didn't make a move earlier was because there was no need to. At that time, Ying Bailu was already ranked 5th on the Longhu leaderboard. The 4 people in front of him were not easy to deal with. Ying Bailu did not care about his reputation that much, so he did not choose to challenge the people in front of him. However, things were different now. Since he had the peerless divine weapon, Ying Bailu didn't mind fighting with Chu Xiu. He wanted to see if Chu Xiu, who had forced him off the dragon and tiger leaderboard, was as strong as wind-sweeping tower thought. The black dragon roared, and its anger soared to the sky. Bailu's stellar energy was so dense that it was terrifying. The ink-colored stellar energy around him condensed into a huge wave that was not inferior to Chu Xiu's powerful devil qi and evil qi. As the black dragon roared, its stellar energy tore through Chu Xiu's devil qi. The dragon-shaped true qi transformed into a huge dragon claw that slashed down on Chu Xiu's head. The claw was over 30 meters long, and it seemed like it was going to crush Chu Xiu. Raising his head, he saw that the demonic saber in Chu Xiu's hand was emitting a boundless ferocious aura. The 3 sabers of the Way of Avicii slashed out, and the 3 sabers merged into one. The dragon claw did not manage to crush Chu Xiu, but was torn apart by Chu Xiu's saber. However, at this moment, Bailu closed in. His body shone with an incomparably dense layer of ink-colored true qi. His figure was like an azure dragon, and a casual strike of his carried the power of a powerful battle skill. Dragons fight in the wild, killing in the pugilistic world. Bailu did not have any weapons, but once he attacked, his entire body would be as terrifying as a weapon. The Xianxia clan's royal heavenly treasure records was not very famous in the pugilistic world. It was because most people could not tell what kind of cultivation technique it was. They did not even know what its special characteristics were. However, as Bailu exchanged blows with Chu Xiu more or less understood what the special characteristics of the royal heavenly treasure records were. The special characteristic of the royal heavenly treasure records was that it had no special characteristics. However, one would not be able to find any flaws in this cultivation technique. The demon saber in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down consecutively, and the saber auras were extremely sharp. However, Bailu dared to use his own gang qi to take on precious weapons head-on. Moreover, he did not seem to be at a disadvantage at all. The quality of his gang qi was extremely condensed. The two of them exchanged several tens of blows within a short period of time. It seemed like neither of them could do anything to the other. Although Chu Xiu's demon saber was domineering and fierce, Bailu's gang qi was extremely powerful. He could completely take on Chu Xiu head-on. Chu Xiu frowned slightly, sheathed his saber, and retreated. However, Bailu did not give in at all. The black gang qi around him condensed into the shape of a black dragon. However, its body was straight, just like a dragon spear. With a thrust of the spear, endless sharp qi gathered on the dragon's head, and the winds and clouds parted. Bailu did not need to use any weapons. However, under the control of the Royal Heavenly Treasure Records gang qi, his spear attack had a powerful aura of being able to hold out against 10,000 enemies. Even those experts who used spears in military formations might not be able to have Bailu's aura. Chu Xiu held onto the Dugu seal, and the gang qi shield instantly rose up. It was as immovable as a mountain, impervious to all arts. Dugu Yin's defense against attacks of the gang qi attribute was very strong. Logically speaking, Dugu Yin's defense against Bailu's attack should be better than that of a cultivator with a powerful physical body like Zhong Xian. However, Bailu's attack was extremely strange. When the dragon spear struck Dugu Yin's body, a strange force spun continuously, rapidly whittling away at Dugu Yin's strength. It broke through the point at which Dugu Yin's strength was crushed. Chu Xiu's countenance changed. He formed the Wisdom Fist imprint and set up a gang qi domain that was like an inescapable net. Although the dragon spear, which was less than 10 feet away from Chu Xiu, slowed down a little, it still continued to pierce toward Chu Xiu's chest without stopping. Bailu had no enmity with Chu Xiu. Even if he was a little uncomfortable with Lu Fengxian, he would not vent his anger on Chu Xiu. Although Bailu was not very broad-minded, he was not that narrow-minded. Bailu did not hold back because he knew that Chu Xiu's strength was there for all to see. Chu Xiu was definitely an existence that could fight him. Against such an opponent, holding back would mean that he would lose. Therefore, Ing Bailu would not hold back. Instead, he would go all out. Moreover, he did not think that Chu Xiu would be so weak. If Chu Xiu could not even withstand his spear attack, he would be letting down the wind-sweeping tower's ranking. The wind-sweeping tower's importance to the top 5 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard was no less than the Windcloud list. In fact, this was indeed the case. Although Ing Bailu's spear attack was only a little slower under the Wisdom Fist Seal's aura field, this slight delay was more than enough. Boundless killing intent condensed. When Chu Xiu's fist landed, a scarlet light suddenly erupted. Extinguishing heaven and earth, annihilating oblivion, killing fist. An explosion of aura field was heard. Under the oblivion killing fist, the dragon spear suddenly shattered. Even Ing Bailu was shocked by the killing intent. However, Ing Bailu still did not retreat. The ink-colored aura field condensed in his left hand again, and a dragon coiled around it. However, this time, it did not condense into a dragon spear. Instead, it condensed into the shape of a long saber. This time, the dragon's head was the handle, and the long and narrow dragon tail condensed into the shape of a blade. The saber slashed down, as if it could split the sky, and moved forward with indomitable will. The saber was domineering, and the most important thing was the momentum. Chu Xiu used the saber, so he could naturally feel the true intent and momentum contained in Ing Bailu's attack. It was not inferior to his attainments in the way of the saber, but Chu Xiu's path was different from Ing Bailu's. Looking at the saber, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes, and there was a solemn look in his eyes. It was only at this moment that Chu Xiu understood why Ing Bailu was known as Young Master Peerless. The person who gave Ing Bailu this nickname might have done so because Ing Bailu knew too many miscellaneous things, but in fact, Ing Bailu was also like that in the way of martial arts. That spear strike just now, in the hands of a true spear user, such as the generals of Northern Yen and Eastern Qi, could not be considered stunning, nor could it be considered too powerful. But among martial artists of the same level, or even some weaker martial Dao masters, there were not many who could compare to Ing Bailu. And now, Ing Bailu's saber technique was the same. Although it was not amazing, it could at least be ranked at the top among those of the same level. No wonder Ing Bailu did not use a weapon. With his attainments, he could use any weapon skillfully. He might as well use his imperial heavenly treasure records to form a weapon with his Gang Qi. If the other members of the Xianxia Ying clan were as strong as Ing Bailu, then halberd would be very useful to the Xianxia Ying clan. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not retreat in the face of Ing Bailu's attack. Instead, he took it head-on. Placing his right hand in front of his chest, he formed the fearless seal. The murderous intent in Chu Xiu's eyes receded, and in its place was a majestic and dazzling Buddhist light, making Chu Xiu look extremely dignified. Amidst the boundless Buddhist light, the shadow of a Vairocana appeared behind Chu Xiu and merged with Chu Xiu. In an instant, Chu Xiu felt as if his entire body was on fire, and powerful energy filled his body. A palm strike, shifting sun steals the heavens. Under the shifting sun art, the great dragon saber in Ing Bailu's hand shattered. The powerful energy caused the usually calm Ing Bailu's expression to change slightly. Moreover, it was not over after shattering Ing Bailu's great dragon saber. The power of the shifting sun art pressed down on Ing Bailu, enveloping him in a majestic Buddhist light. As the core cultivation technique of Master Tan Yuan, a true fire spirit refinement realm expert, there was no need to doubt the power of the great sun-changing technique. In fact, when Chu Xiu used his full strength and disregarded the consumption of his energy, he could fight Zhong Xian head-on until they were evenly matched. Ing Bailu's expression was solemn, but he did not choose to retreat. Instead, there was a strange change in his eyes. His jet-black pupils suddenly turned golden, and his pupils were vertical, like some kind of snake. At the same time, a deafening dragon's roar rang out around him. Boundless black energy enveloped Ing Bailu and transformed into 9 black dragon silhouettes that coiled around Ing Bailu. They roared and revolved around him as they fought against Chu Xiu's great sun's shifting art. Chapter 495. The battle between Chu Xiu and Ing Bailu could be said to have dazzled everyone's eyes. It could be said to be full of ups and downs, but it also let them see the true strength of the younger generation. However, even at this moment, the two sides were still evenly matched, and they were in a stalemate. Last time, when Chu Xiu fought with Zhong Xian, they were also in a stalemate, but at that time, Chu Xiu could feel that if the stalemate continued, he would definitely lose. Because Zhong Xian's strength was too strong, so strong that in the end, the first to exhaust his strength would definitely be him. And this time, although Chu Xiu was not sure that he could win against Ing Bailu, he did not feel that he was inferior. If they really fought with their full strength, the outcome of the two sides was still unknown. Chu Xiu still had many trump cards that he had not used, and he believed that Ing Bailu would be the same. However, while Chu Xiu and Ing Bailu were still in a stalemate, Dong Qikuan and the others had already changed. Xian Jiuyo had been suppressed for 10,000 years, and his strength was actually not much different from Shi Jiuling and the others. It was only because he had triggered the imprint left by Lu Wenhou that he could erupt with this level of power. But at this time, because Halberd's seal had been lifted, the imprint left by Lu Wenhou had completely disappeared, and Xian Jiuyo could no longer borrow power, so it could be said that he was getting weaker and weaker. At the beginning, he was suppressing Dong Qikuan and the others, but later, it was Dong Qikuan and the others suppressing him. Without the pressure, Qiao Liandong looked at the battle between Chu Xiu and Ing Bailu, and a trace of haze appeared in his eyes. Last time in the Dead Man Valley, he was scared away by Chu Xiu, and this time, Chu Xiu still dared to be arrogant, relying on Fang Qi Xiao and Xia Xiaolu by his side, which made Qiao Liandong, who was not very broad-minded, somewhat dissatisfied. Previously in the mountain opening ceremony, if Dong Qikuan had not given him a way out, and Xia Xiaolu and Fang Qi Xiao were not there, Qiao Liandong might have already made a move. Now that Xia Xiaolu and Fang Qi Xiao were not there, and this Chu Xiu put on an appearance of fighting for the divine weapon, Dong Qikuan would not speak for him anymore. This time, he would not let Chu Xiu continue to be arrogant. However, Qiao Liandong did not directly make a move. Although he was not broad-minded, he did not want to make a move. Qiao Liandong did not make the first. Although he was not broad-minded, he did not want others to say that. Therefore, Qiao, Xiu and Sword Ing Chu, Master, Yan, Ing Ming, and Bailu, Qiu, and Ing and Chu, Xiu, and if the sneak attack was successful, they could cooperate with Ing Bailu to get rid of Chu Xiu. Even if it failed, it did not matter. At that time, Fang Ting would pretend to be injured, and it would be Qiao Liandong's turn to make a move. Although Qiao Liandong would be said to be protective, his reputation for being protective had long been known, and he was not afraid of people saying it. In any case, it was better than being narrow-minded and taking the initiative to find trouble with the younger generation. At this time, hearing Qiao Liandong's message, Fang Ting's eyes suddenly revealed a strange look. He quietly withdrew from the fight with the other martial artists, and, seeing that Lu Fengxian did not notice his movements, he went behind Chu Xiu. Fang Ting was nearly 50 years old when he stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. In fact, he was not much younger than Qiao Liandong. If he was asked to fight with Chu Xiu head-on, even if his master, Qiao Liandong, had instructed him, Fang Ting would not dare. But now, it was just a sneak attack, and it was not a problem. A slender miaodao was held in Fang Ting's hand. His eyes suddenly blossomed with an ominous glint. Blood qi condensed on the edge of the blade, and he suddenly slashed at Chu Xiu's back. Even when he was fighting with Ing Bailu, Chu Xiu still did not relax his vigilance in other areas. Even before Fang Ting unsheathed his saber, Chu Xiu had already sensed the killing intent on his body. For a martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm like Fang Ting, not to mention that Chu Xiu had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm, even if Chu Xiu was at the five Qis origin realm, it would be easy to kill him. However, now that Chu Xiu was using the sun-changing technique to fight against Ing Bailu, Fang Ting's sneak attack had really found the right time. Sensing that the blade was coming, Chu Xiu did not retreat to defend, and there was no panic in his eyes. A ray of Buddha's light suddenly bloomed behind him, and with a thunderous boom, like the roar of Buddha's thunder, it immediately shattered Fang Ting's blade. His face could not help but turn pale, and he was directly shaken back. Outer Lion Seal. The fast and slow 9 words formula required hand seals to be formed. However, Chu Xiu was already rather familiar with these 9 hand seals. He was even able to form different hand seals with both hands at the same time. Chu Xiu believed that it wouldn't be long before he could combine the 9 hand seals of the fast and slow 9 words formula and unleash its strongest power. At this time, Chu Xiu did not make hand seals, but only used his true qi to activate the outer lion seal. This was also a manifestation of Chu Xiu's extreme understanding of the fast and slow 9 words formula. Although its power was incomparable to the use of hand seals, it was enough to deal with an opponent of Fang Ting's level. On the other side, Ing Bailu could not help but frown when he saw that someone had actually sneaked up on Chu Xiu. He began to slowly withdraw his power, and the 9 dragons barrier disappeared. It was true that he wanted to fight with Chu Xiu, but he only wanted a simple battle, not because of his reputation on the Longhu list. Although he was not as noble as Ing Bailu, he still had his pride. If he won because someone had sneaked up on Chu Xiu, then even if the Longhu list re-ranked him as the 5th, Ing Bailu would not be able to accept this ranking. After Ing Bailu took the initiative to withdraw his attack, Chu Xiu naturally also withdrew his great sun shifting technique and turned around. In an instant, Fang Ting felt a great pressure coming at him, as if he was being targeted by an ancient beast. In an instant, Fang Ting felt a chill in his heart, and just as he was about to say something, he saw that Chu Xiu's eyes had already turned red. As his fist fell, boundless killing intent condensed, and the killing intent stirred the heaven and earth yuan qi, causing Fang Ting's hair to stand on end. Annihilating skies and destroying earth oblivion killing fist. Under this fist that was condensed with boundless killing intent, Fang Ting did not even have time to say a word. His earth vigor exploded around him, and the long saber in his hand slashed down, his figure quickly dodging to the side. But all of this was useless under Chu Xiu's annihilating skies and destroying earth oblivion killing fist. As the fist fell, the scarlet killing intent seemed to condense into a solid substance. With a loud explosion, Fang Ting's figure was directly blasted into a bloody mist by Chu Xiu's fist, and not even his bones were left. Chu Xiu. Seeing this scene, Qiao Liandong roared, and his eyes were already flashing with boundless killing intent, as if he had gone mad. This series of changes happened too quickly, so quickly that even Qiao Liandong did not have time to stop it. Previously, Qiao Liandong thought that even if Fang Ting's sneak attack failed, it would not be a big deal. After all, Chu Xiu was fighting with Ing Bailu. But he did not expect that Ing Bailu would take the initiative to stop at this time, giving Chu Xiu the opportunity to kill his eldest disciple, Fang Ting, in one move. In fact, Qiao Liandong was so angry now, not because Chu Xiu killed his disciple, but because he would not have a good helper in the future. Among Qiao Liandong's disciples, although Fang Ting was the eldest disciple, he wasn't the most talented one, nor was he the one Qiao Liandong doted on the most. However, he was the one who helped Qiao Liandong the most. Among his disciples, Fang Ting had followed Qiao Liandong the longest, and he was also the one who could understand Qiao Liandong's intentions the best. So, Qiao Liandong usually ordered Fang Ting to do most of the things. But now, Fang Ting died in the hands of Chu Xiu, which was equivalent to cutting off one of his arms. How could Qiao Liandong not be angry? On this side, Qiao Liandong directly gave up fighting Xian Jiuyo and went straight to Chu Xiu, the floating blood divine blade in his hand was already flashing with terrifying killing intent. Chu Xiu. You crippled my youngest disciple, and now you killed my eldest disciple. If I don't kill you today, how can I still have the face to stand in the West Chu land? Die for me. With a furious roar, Qiao Liandong went straight to Chu Xiu. The floating blood divine blade suddenly erupted with a powerful blade light that was hundreds of feet long, slashing at Chu Xiu. Moreover, Qiao Liandong's blade momentum seemed to be endless, and he had slashed hundreds of times in an instant. The strength of a martial Dao Grand Master was revealed for a moment. Even if Qiao Liandong was a rogue cultivator, even if he belonged to the kind of existence that was not too strong among the martial Dao Grand Masters, he was still a martial Dao Grand Master powerhouse who had condensed the martial Dao true core. When he attacked, regardless of anything else, just the difference in strength was not something that a unity of heaven realm martial artist could compare with. Chu Xiu took a deep breath, and the heavenly demon dance in his hand also erupted with the same powerful demonic qi and killing intent. He slashed out again and again, resisting Qiao Liandong's attack with great difficulty. After all, a martial Dao Grand Master was a martial Dao Grand Master. A casual attack from the other party was enough for Chu Xiu to use all his strength to resist. On the other side, Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi who were fighting with Xian Jiuyo exchanged glances. Neither of them made a move. At this moment, Xian Jiuyo was no longer a concern. Even without Qiao Liandong, the two of them could also deal with him. Moreover, as Qiao Liandong had thought before, the Dong clan had nothing to do with Chu Xiu. At this moment, Dong Qikuan could not be bothered to care about the personal grievances between Chu Xiu and Qiao Liandong. Meanwhile, Ing Bailu also stood aside without any reaction. He was not considered Chu Xiu's friend, and it was kind of him not to hit him when he was down. It was basically impossible for him to help Chu Xiu. Only Lu Fengxian wanted to help Chu Xiu, but he was at the 5 qis collecting in the origin stage. As soon as he rushed forward, he was directly sent flying by Qiao Liandong's saber. After all, there was a difference of 2 major realms. Chu Xiu could barely resist Qiao Liandong's attack, but it was difficult for Lu Fengxian to resist. Chapter 496. The pressure that a martial Dao Grandmaster brought to Chu Xiu was extraordinary, but Chu Xiu was still able to withstand it. If the top 3 on the Longhu list went all out, they might really be able to match the strength of a martial Dao Grandmaster. At the very least, although Qiao Liandong could bring pressure to Chu Xiu, the pressure was not as strong as when Chu Xiu was facing Zhong Xian. On the other side, Qiao Liandong saw that he could only suppress Chu Xiu and had yet to defeat Chu Xiu. Qiao Liandong's expression turned a little ugly. Sometimes, the older generation of martial artists did not want to fight with the younger generation of martial artists. The reason was very simple: it was not worth it. When the older generation of martial artists fought with the younger generation of martial artists, it was expected that they would win, and they would have to bear the reputation of bullying the weak. However, if they lost, they would become the stepping stone of the younger generation of martial artists, and they would be accused of being useless as they got older. Although Qiao Liandong did not lose, he was a martial Dao Grandmaster after all. Yet, he still failed to suppress Chu Xiu after making so many moves. He could even feel the strange gazes of the other martial artists. Sensing the gazes of the others, Qiao Liandong attacked more fiercely. The blood-colored saber aura slashed down like a downpour, but it still could not do anything to Chu Xiu. These saber aura were either directly smashed by Chu Xiu or offset by Chu Xiu's defensive means such as Dugu Seal. Although it looked a little embarrassing, Chu Xiu could at least block it. Moreover, Chu Xiu was actually at a disadvantage in the battle at the moment because this place suppressed his mental power, making it temporarily impossible for him to use Heaven's Sun gazing at air and some other mental secret techniques. Therefore, it was inevitable that Chu Xiu would lose a part of his combat power. If Chu Xiu attacked with all his strength, he would not even be in a sorry state. While Chu Xiu was holding on, Xiao Liandong was really angry. The blood-red long saber in his hand burst with a boundless ferocious sharpness. As the saber slashed down, the blood-red saber aura extended in an instant, converging into a river of blood in mid-air, shrouding Chu Xiu. The saber sliced the blood river, and heaven and earth feared destruction. The incomparably huge blood river extended for nearly 1,000 feet. The power it exuded was incomparably terrifying, not giving Chu Xiu any room to dodge at all. In an instant, Buddhist light erupted around Chu Xiu, and the shadow of Vairocana merged with him, emitting a dazzling radiance. The great art of changing sun was executed. This time, Chu Xiu burned almost all of his strength. He held the seal of fearlessness in his hand, and his Dharma image was solemn. Boundless Buddhist light shone out, and when his palm descended, he actually held up the blood river and was in a deadlock with it. "Break for me!" Xiao Liandong roared, and powerful Gang Qi erupted around his body, triggering the power of heaven and earth, even causing the surrounding Qi of heaven and earth to explode. The Buddhist light shattered, and the shadow of Vairocana shattered. Chu Xiu's figure continued to retreat, until he retreated a few hundred feet, directly to a corner of the palace. For the current Chu Xiu, there was still a big gap between him and a martial Dao Grandmaster. A Grandmaster expert condensed the martial Dao true core and communicated with heaven and earth. No matter how strong a person was, they could not compete with the power of heaven and earth. Xiao Liandong's sudden eruption was really something that Chu Xiu could not resist. Xiao Liandong stepped forward with his saber, his face full of killing intent. Chu Xiu looked up and suddenly saw the tunnel he had created before. He said to Lu Fengxian in a deep voice, "Brother Lu, don't worry about me. You go and guard halberd first. Don't let it fall into the hands of others." As soon as he said that, Chu Xiu directly formed the internal binding seal, turned around, and fled to the tunnel he had created before. Seeing Chu Xiu's actions, Xiao Liandong hesitated for a moment, but he also chased after him. On the side of Wen Ho's inheritance, it seemed that the outcome would not be decided for a while. Even if the outcome was decided, there was still Dong Qikuan and Su Ting. The two of them would inevitably have to go through a fierce battle. Therefore, it would not be too late for him to come back and compete with them after he killed Chu Xiu. With that thought in mind, Xiao Liandong only hesitated for a moment before he immediately chased after Chu Xiu. Behind him, Lu Fengxian frowned, but he was not too worried. He knew Chu Xiu's character. Generally, Chu Xiu would never put himself in danger. Since Chu Xiu said he was confident, he must be confident. At that moment, in the tunnel, even though Chu Xiu had unleashed the power of the internal binding seal, Xiao Liandong was still chasing after him. No matter how fast the internal binding seal was, it could not shake off a martial Dao master like Xiao Liandong. Of course, Chu Xiu had never thought of shaking off Xiao Liandong. After running for another 15 minutes, a palace appeared in front of Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu jumped directly into it, and appeared in front of him was Yan Qishao, who was imprisoned here. Seeing that Chu Xiu had returned, Yan Qishao could not help but be surprised. "Why are you back again?" Chu Xiu chuckled and said, "I brought you a big gift." Before Yan Qishao could react, Xiao Liandong had already appeared in the main hall. Seeing this scene, Xiao Liandong was stunned for a moment, then he sneered and said, "Brat, you want to rely on this monster to resist me?" In the great hall where Marquis Wen was suppressed, the three demons didn't gain any advantage from me even when they joined hands. Yan Qishao's skull suddenly bloomed with a wisp of blue flame. He roared, "Who are you calling a monster? Do you want to die?" Chu Xiu faintly said to Yan Qishao, "It seems like there's a problem with your plan. Your three companions are currently being ganged up on, and they're almost unable to hold on. Now, I'll help you lure one over, and we can join hands to kill him. This will also reduce some of the pressure on your three companions." At this time, Yan Qishao suddenly sneered and said, "Do you really think I'm an idiot? Although under Lord Wenho in the past, although I was in charge of using my hands and not in charge of using my brains, I can still see that it is clearly you, a junior, who has enmity with that fellow. Now you want to use me and drag me down with you. There is no such thing in this world." Seeing that Xiao Liandong had already walked over with a sneer, Chu Xiu quickly said, "This is not use, but mutual benefit. If you want to resurrect Marquis Lu Wenho, as long as you don't use me as a body, I don't care whether you live or die. On the contrary, your people are now at a disadvantage. If I didn't help you lure one over, your 3 companions would have been defeated. In any case, you and I have a common enemy. You won't suffer a loss if you kill him." Yan Qishao was slightly hesitant. Although he was not stupid, he was not good at using his brain. He did not know how to make a decision. At this time, Shui Wuxiang's doppelganger suddenly emerged from the ground and shouted, "Yan Qishao! Help him!" Over at Shui Wuxiang's side, he and Shi Jiuling could only bitterly resist, while Xian Jiuyo was getting weaker and weaker. If Qiao Liandong was allowed to return, then Xian Jiuyo would immediately be defeated. Shui Wuxiang's doppelgangers were everywhere in this sealed land. After he sensed the movement here, he immediately made a decision for Yan Qishao. Hearing Shui Wuxiang's words, Yan Qishao did not hesitate. The 4 iron chains in his hands and feet danced in the air and smashed towards Qiao Liandong's head with blazing flames. Qiao Liandong coldly snorted and slashed with the floating blood divine saber in his hand, directly chopping away the iron chains. Although he failed to cut them, it was clear that Yan Qishao's attack had no effect on Qiao Liandong. However, Chu Xiu took advantage of this opportunity and took the initiative to attack. He took a step forward and entered the selfless killing realm. The devil chi around his body had been raised to the extreme. With a slash of his saber, the devil chi surged up to the sky like a devil god. Qiao Liandong's eyes revealed a trace of killing intent. The more outstanding Chu Xiu's performance was, the more intense his killing intent towards Chu Xiu was. Since both sides had shed all pretense of cordiality, then he must kill Chu Xiu today. Qiao Liandong did not care about the Guanzhong torture room, but looking at the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed, it was needless to say how terrifying Chu Xiu would be in the future. If he did not kill Chu Xiu today, he would definitely become a great trouble in the future. Qiao Liandong suddenly stomped on the ground. In an instant, a sea of blood rose under his feet. Countless gang qi condensed into blood-colored threads and entangled Chu Xiu. At the same time, the floating blood divine saber in his hand slashed towards Chu Xiu with awe-inspiring saber momentum. The blood-colored sharp edge pierced through the heaven and earth, as if it was splitting the heavens. At this moment, Chu Xiu's eyes instantly bloomed with a mysterious light. The stars in the world were constantly rotating in his eyes, appearing extremely mysterious. Heaven's sun gazing at air. Previously in the pool, Chu Xiu found that his mental strength was suppressed. This meant that Chu Xiu could not use his primordial spirit's secret technique in Heaven's sun gazing at air. However, when Chu Xiu was dealing with Yan Qishao, he found that the suppression of his mental strength had actually disappeared. Chu Xiu guessed that this situation should be related to Yan Qishao and the others. In fact, Yan Qishao had already removed a part of the seal in this hall, and even the chains on his limbs had been torn. If it were not for the chain on Yan Qishao's waist, Yan Qishao would have been able to join forces with Shui Wuxiang and the others to fight. Therefore, at this time, Chu Xiu chose to lure Qiao Liandong here. He was not only prepared to join forces with Yan Qishao to kill Qiao Liandong, but also because this was the only place where Chu Xiu's strength could be exerted to its peak. Under the effect of Heaven's sun gazing at air, Chu Xiu's saber was drawn but not released. His figure wandered back and forth among the boundless blood-colored threads. None of those densely packed blood-colored threads could actually touch Chu Xiu. Qiao Liandong's expression suddenly became extremely ugly. It was this feeling again. Last time in the Valley of the Dead, Chu Xiu used this trick to scare him away. However, Xiao Liandong would not make the same mistake a second time. Therefore, this time, Xiao Liandong did not retreat. Instead, his saber momentum did not stop as it slashed towards Chu Xiu. Chapter 497. The effect of the heaven sun gazing at air skill would inevitably be reduced when facing a martial Dao master. After all, a martial Dao master was different from an ordinary martial artist. The other party's power changes were 10 times or even dozens of times stronger than an ordinary martial artist in the unity of heaven and man realm. Therefore, if Chu Xiu wanted to use the heaven sun gazing at air skill to deduce the changes in Xiao Liandong's trajectory, he would have to put in 10 times or even dozens of times more energy than when dealing with a martial artist of the same level. Moreover, there was only one chance. Chu Xiu's mental strength did not allow him to use the heaven sun gazing at air skill all the time, so Chu Xiu had to be cautious. The boundless blood-colored threads were dodged by Chu Xiu, and Xiao Liandong's fierce saber aura was also barely dodged by Chu Xiu. Yan Qishao also waved the chain to harass Xiao Liandong, but it had little effect. Seeing that Chu Xiu kept dodging, Yan Qishao could not help but curse, "What are you thinking? You only know how to dodge. Why aren't you attacking? Could it be that you're doing this on purpose to exhaust my strength?" Chu Xiu ignored Yan Qishao and exerted the heaven sun gazing at air skill to the extreme. However, he did not attack and kept waiting. An unsheathed saber was the most terrifying. Xiao Liandong had not experienced the true horror of the heaven sun gazing at air skill, but he hated this feeling. Seeing that he could not take down Chu Xiu, Xiao Liandong became more and more anxious. With a roar, the blood-colored gang qi around Xiao Liandong erupted. He slashed down with his saber, directly drawing the power of heaven and earth. The saber aura condensed into a 100-meter blood river. Even the surrounding power of heaven and earth had poured into the blood river, making the power of Xiao Liandong's saber extremely terrifying. The instant Xiao Liandong made his move, Chu Xiu, who had been evading with the heaven sun gazing at air all this while, made his move. This was the first time Chu Xiu had attacked with his saber. Boundless devil qi and blood evil qi had been condensing on the blade for a long time. That power had been accumulated to the extreme. When the saber slashed down, the trajectory of Chu Xiu's saber could be said to be extremely strange. The saber momentum twisted and turned, and it slashed at Xiao Liandong's flaws and weakest points. Cultivation techniques and martial techniques did not necessarily have to be as powerful as possible. Moreover, Xiao Liandong was a rogue cultivator. His own cultivation technique could not be considered brilliant. This was not the only loophole that Chu Xiu could take advantage of, but it was the only loophole that Chu Xiu was confident of dealing enough damage to Xiao Liandong. This saber slashed down from the crack in the blood river, tearing apart the stellar energy. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of Xiao Liandong. A look of shock appeared on Xiao Liandong's face. No matter how hard he tried, he could not understand how Chu Xiu had managed to tear through his attack and arrive in front of him with a saber strike that was far weaker than his. If it were an ordinary martial artist at the unity of heaven and man realm, Xiao Liandong would not have cared even if the attack was already in front of him. After all, there was a big gap between them. However, this person in front of him was Chu Xiu, who was ranked in the top 5 on the Longhu leaderboard and could fight with him, a martial Dao grandmaster, for such a long time. "Get out of my way!" Xiao Liandong roared. He did not have time to defend, but his stellar energy still erupted around him in an attempt to resist. However, at this moment, as Chu Xiu's saber slashed down, a bright divine light suddenly bloomed in his eyes. The last remaining trace of mental strength was condensed into invisible strings by Chu Xiu. With the fluctuation of his mind, an invisible sound wave instantly erupted. It was silent, but it resounded in Xiao Liandong's heart like a demonic sound piercing his ears, causing him to groan. His stellar energy dissipated uncontrollably and most of it dissipated. This was the soul-subduing Hades song of the 9 forms of the soul catcher. When performed at its peak, it used the primordial spirit as the strings and played with the mind. At the end of the song, the soul would be subdued. However, Chu Xiu had consumed a lot of mental strength because he had been using the heaven's sun gazing at air skill for a long time. At this time, he could not play the soul-subduing Hades song completely and could only play it for a moment to affect Xiao Liandong. However, this was enough for Chu Xiu. As the stellar energy dissipated, Chu Xiu's saber directly smashed the remaining stellar energy. This saber slashed directly on Xiao Liandong's chest, leaving a bloody mark. The demonic aura entered his body, causing Xiao Liandong to spit out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were filled with horror and disbelief. He had never imagined that he would actually be seriously injured by a junior practitioner like Chu Xiu. Most importantly, he had even lost in such a baffling manner. He had clearly been suppressing Chu Xiu from the start, while Chu Xiu had only been able to dodge in a sorry state. In the end, when Xiao Liandong had been prepared to deal a heavy blow to kill him, he had been stunned by Chu Xiu's series of killer moves. Even Xiao Liandong had not been able to react. Xiao Liandong did not react, but Yan Qishao did. Yan Qishao was an existence that surpassed the martial Dao Grand Master level when he was at his peak. He was not bragging when he said that he could easily crush Dong Qikuan and the others. Although he had lost his cultivation, he still had his knowledge. He could see the magic of the heaven's sun gazing at air. Why is this kid's cultivation method so similar to that of the East Sea Island Master? That guy's cultivation method was very difficult to deal with in my era. Could this kid be his successor? Yan Qishao muttered in his heart, but he did not care. It was not the time for him to think so much. 10,000 years had passed, and the people had long changed. They had also become like this, neither human nor ghost. The most important thing now was to resurrect Master Wenhou. As long as Master Wenhou was resurrected, they could all return to the world. Therefore, while Xiao Liandong had not reacted and was still seriously injured, Yan Qishao had already shrouded him with 4 huge chains. Moreover, countless flame arrows condensed around his body and blasted towards Xiao Liandong like a storm. Xiao Liandong raised his saber and was about to attack, but the demonic qi and murderous aura in his body erupted at the same time, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. In the face of Yan Qishao's attack, he could only barely defend himself. Chu Xiu's saber did not kill him. Martial Dao masters were not that easy to kill, but Chu Xiu's saber had left a significant impact on him. The source of the demonic qi on the heavenly demon dance was not only Chu Xiu's own earth energy, but also the material of his body, which was made from the heavenly demon order left behind by the Kunlun devil cult in the past. The demonic qi was so pure that it could not be found in the world. And Chu Xiu's own earth energy was also the blood-refined divine shield of the Blood River sect, a major demonic sect in the past. The condensed blood fiend qi and lurked in a person's body was not easy to bear. If it was under normal circumstances, Xiao Liandong could still use true qi to suppress and expel it. After all, Chu Xiu was not a martial Dao master, so it was not difficult to expel his true qi. However, Yan Qishao's act of throwing stones at him while he was down was killing him. He did not give him a chance to suppress and expel it at all. Seeing that he was in such a state, Xiao Liandong roared and burst out the last of his strength to smash Yan Qishao's chains away, then fled toward the central hall. At this point, Xiao Liandong naturally wouldn't care about face and the like. Being a martial Dao Grand Master was also fatal. Looking at Xiao Liandong's back, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a strong killing intent. Killing Xiao Liandong but leaving his disciple alive was like cutting the grass without removing the roots. It was a very troublesome thing. On the other hand, killing Xiao Liandong's disciple but leaving Xiao Liandong alive was like letting the tiger return to the mountain. It was a very stupid thing to do. Chu Xiu was afraid of trouble, but he was not stupid. So today, Xiao Liandong must die. In fact, Chu Xiu's current state was not very good. After using the heaven's sun gazing at air, he also used the soul-suppressing Hades song of the 9 major techniques of the soul catcher. This was a great consumption for Chu Xiu's mental strength. At this time, Chu Xiu's face was a little pale, and there was even a tingling feeling in his mind. However, Chu Xiu seemed to not feel it. He directly formed the inner binding seal with his hand, and his speed exploded to the extreme. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived behind Xiao Liandong. The majestic Buddha's light bloomed, and Vairocana descended. The Buddha's light shone, changing the sun and stealing the sky. Under the powerful pressure of the sun-changing technique, Xiao Liandong no longer dared to escape. He looked back and could only see Chu Xiu's palm falling. His figure was hidden in the endless Buddha's light, as if the real Vairocana had arrived. Xiao Liandong roared and slashed with his saber. However, under the light of Vairocana, his saber collapsed, and the blood-colored Miaodao was even blasted away. His entire body was blasted into the ground, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. For the first time, a look of horror appeared in his eyes. Xiao Liandong had fought countless enemies in his life, and he could be considered a veteran of hundreds of battles. However, he never expected that one day, he would feel the horror of death at the hands of a junior warrior like Chu Xiu. Xiao Liandong gritted his teeth and roared. His right hand directly pierced into his left arm, and a large amount of blood instantly flowed out. However, the blood did not spill on the ground. Under the control of his Gang Qi, it condensed into a blood-colored long saber made entirely of blood, shining with a terrifying luster. However, at this time, Chu Xiu seemed to not see it. He stretched out a hand, palm down, and in an instant, the boundless Buddha's light condensed in his palm. His palm was very small, but the Buddha's light seemed to be able to illuminate the world. This was a very strange feeling, but as Chu Xiu's palm fell, everything around him began to distort. The world's essence was absorbed into this palm, and even Xiao Liandong himself seemed to be included in this palm. Everything was distorted, as if a roulette was spinning. In the end, the Buddha's light erupted, and everything returned to nothingness. Life and death were illusory, and the 5 skandhas were all empty. Colorless stopping grand handprint. This move was a cultivation method created by Master Tam Yuan himself. Life and death gathered in the palm, evolving into the heavens, and a mustard seed grew. Thousands of changes were contained in this handprint. At this time, as the Buddha's light completely dissipated, Xiao Liandong's figure flew out of it. He did not have the slightest injury on his body, but the genuine qi in his body had been wiped out by the colorless stopping grand handprint. At this time, he was even weaker than an ordinary person. Holding the saber, Chu Xiu chopped off Xiao Liandong's head before he landed on the ground and held it in his hand. Although the heavenly demon dance was not stained with blood, it had in fact drunk the blood of a martial Dao master. Chapter 498. Holding Xiao Liandong's head, Chu Xiu had actually exhausted himself. The heaven's sun gazing at air and the soul-suppressing Hades song had severely suppressed his mental strength. Furthermore, Chu Xiu had used the sun-switching technique and the formless sealing palm in succession. Although he had killed Xiao Liandong with the series of attacks, he had expended a lot of energy. Yan Qishao silently looked at Chu Xiu, but he didn't choose to do anything. He wanted to do it, but he wasn't sure. Chu Xiu's strength was beyond his imagination. Although it was nominally Chu Xiu and Yan Qishao working together to kill Xiao Liandong, Yan Qishao was only assisting from the side. Chu Xiu was the one who actually attacked. Yan Qishao only used 20% of his strength. Although Chu Xiu seemed to be exhausted, Yan Qishao still didn't dare to make a move. Holding Xiao Yindong's head, Chu Xiu grinned at Yan Qishao and said, "I'll help you take a look at your plan to resurrect Lu Wenho. But I'm afraid you'll be disappointed in the end." After saying that, Chu Xiu directly carried Xiao Yindong's head and returned to the tunnel. Yan Qishao also didn't say a word. At this time, in the central hall, Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi were still suppressing Xian Jiuyo. As for the others, including Lu Fengxian, they were fighting for halberd. Unfortunately, whether it was Lu Fengxian or some of the unity of the world experts, even if some of them had touched halberd, they were still repelled by halberd. This 9-revolution divine weapon was simply too stubborn. It didn't give them any chance to get it. At this time, Fang Qi Xiao and Xia Xiaolu finally arrived. With Xia Xiaolu's strength, he could participate in the fight for halberd. As for Fang Qi Xiao, he didn't make a move and just stared at Ing Bailu. Ing Bailu frowned and said, "Fang Qi Xiao, why are you staring at me instead of fighting for the peerless divine weapon?" Fang Qi Xiao chuckled and said, "Why would I snatch that thing? I'm a sword user, so I won't be able to snatch Wushuang's sword. I reckon that after Wushuang senses my aura, he'll even take the initiative to attack me. I won't do that." "Infatuated seed, I heard that you fought with Chu Xiu just now and were evenly matched. TSK, you've hidden your strength quite well. Why don't we fight again?" In fact, Fang Qi Xiao was very similar to Ing Bailu in some aspects. He didn't care much about the empty titles on the Dragon and Tiger list. If the Dragon and Tiger list said he was third, then he was third. He also wouldn't take the initiative to challenge someone just because of this ranking. However, if he met an opponent he was interested in, Fang Qi Xiao didn't mind stretching his muscles. He had fought with Zhong Xian and Zhang Chengzhen on the Dragon and Tiger list, but unfortunately, he was the one who suffered. Although the guy ranked 4th on the Dragon and Tiger list was elusive, Fang Qi Xiao often roamed the Jianghu. He had met that guy before, but he was rebuffed. That guy's martial Dao was the martial Dao of killing people. Once he threw his flying dagger, he would see blood and determine life and death. It was extreme to the extreme. Fang Qi Xiao was looking for someone to compare martial Dao with, not to risk his life, so he didn't fight with his opponent at that time. As for Chu Xiu, when Chu Xiu was in the 5 Qis collecting in Origin Realm, although Fang Qi Xiao had fought with Chu Xiu, that was not when Chu Xiu was at his peak. Now that Chu Xiu had stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm, the two sides were very familiar. Fang Qi Xiao was a little embarrassed to challenge him. After all, his ranking was higher than Chu Xiu's. This time, Ing Bailu in front of him had aroused Fang Qi Xiao's interest. Ing Bailu rarely fought before, and Fang Qi Xiao had not seen him before. However, Fang Qi Xiao knew about the battle between Chu Xiu and Zhong Xian. He also knew about Chu Xiu's strength. Now that Ing Bailu could fight with Chu Xiu to this realm, it was enough to show how strong Ing Bailu was. Moreover, Fang Qi Xiao knew about the Xiangshui Ing clan's heritage. Ing Bailu probably had some trump cards that he had not taken out. Looking at Fang Qi Xiao who was eager to fight, Ing Bailu frowned and said, "Fang Qi Xiao, now is not the time to fight. If you are also interested in halberd, we can fight. But since you have no intention of fighting for halberd, why waste time here? I remember that you are not a person who likes to fight." Fang Qi Xiao waved his hand and said, "You are wrong. It is not that I don't like to fight. It is just that most people do not interest me. I mean, Ing Bailu, you and I are old acquaintances. You have fought with Chu Xiu, why can't you fight with me? You don't have to be so biased, do you?" While Fang Qi Xiao was entangled with Ing Bailu, Chu Xiu had already recovered some qi in the tunnel. He appeared in the hall with Xiao Yindong's head in his hand. When everyone saw Chu Xiu's figure, they couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Their eyes were filled with shock. Those who didn't notice Chu Xiu earlier were also attracted by the exclamations of the crowd. When they saw the item in Chu Xiu's hand, they all sucked in a breath of cold air. Xiao Liandong was dead. A dignified martial Dao Grand Master actually died in the hands of a junior martial artist like Chu Xiu. In the history of Jianghu, killing a martial Dao Grand Master at the unity of heaven and man realm had happened many times. Even in this generation of Jianghu, little celestial master Zhang Chengzhen had done such a thing. Although Zhong Xian and the others did not have any battle records, everyone believed that the top 5 on the Longhu list were qualified to fight with martial Dao Grand Masters. It was just that their battle records were not circulated. But it was just hearsay. Now that Chu Xiu was standing here with Xiao Liandong's head in his hand, it was a great shock to the people present. For these martial artists in Jianghu, martial Dao Grand Masters were extremely special existences. Once they condensed the martial Dao true core, they would immediately become a respected Grand Master. They would even have the qualification to establish their own sect and become a true powerhouse in Jianghu. However, such a martial Dao Grand Master was now beheaded by a junior like Chu Xiu. They could not help but be shocked. Ing Bailu took a deep look at Chu Xiu. He was also shocked. How did Chu Xiu do it? With Ing Bailu's strength, if he were to face a martial Dao Grand Master in a life-and-death battle, Ing Bailu would not dare to say that he could win. However, if he used the Ing clan's forbidden trump cards, Ing Bailu would only have a little more confidence, but there was still no hope of winning. Looking at the shocked Fang Qi Shao, Ing Bailu said indifferently, "If you want to fight, you should find Chu Xiu, not me. That person is much fiercer than me. When I fought him just now, he did not use his full strength." Fang Qi Shao paused, and the shock on his face turned into a grin. He chuckled and said, "It's true that Chu Xiu did not use his full strength, but you didn't use your full strength either, did you? My Sword King City's sect leader once said that among the 9 great families, your Xianxia clan is the one that hides its strength the most. For so many years, the Xianxia clan has been ranked first most of the time. Even when it was surpassed by others, your Xianxia clan never panicked. Who knows when you'll catch up?" But in fact, the Xianxia clan was deliberately hiding their true strength. If the Xianxia clan revealed their true strength, it would make the other aristocratic families feel despair. Your style is the same as the Ying clans. If you have the strength, just show it. Why hide it so deeply? While Fang Qi Shao was still talking nonsense with Ing Bailu, the outcome of the battle between Dong Qikuan and the others had already been decided. Xian Jiuyo had exhausted the power he had obtained from LV Wenho's mark. Now that the mark had disappeared, he no longer had the strength to fight the 2 martial Dao Grand Masters. His aura had been shattered by the 2 martial Dao Grand Masters. However, Xian Jiuyo's group seemed to be undying existences in this place of suppression. Although the aura on his body had been scattered, he had reformed his body. However, this body was a little smaller than before and appeared to be a little weaker. Xian Jiuyo said anxiously, "Things have gone wrong. We can't win. What should we do now?" Shui Wuxiang didn't say anything. Just when Xian Jiuyo was about to say something, Shui Wuxiang's clone appeared from the ground with Xiao Liandong's headless corpse. Shui Wuxiang said in a deep voice, "What else can we do? Now, we can only forcefully revive Lord Wenho. It doesn't matter if we have a suitable body or if we have enough qi and blood. In any case, this is the only method we have left. Otherwise, if we attract the experts outside, especially the ox-nosed Daoist sect and the bald donkey Buddhist sect, once they make a move, we won't even be able to keep our true spirits. Shi Jiuling. Activate the formation and extract this fellow's qi and blood. Together with the qi and blood that we have accumulated, place them at the center of the formation. Xian Jiuyo and I will stall for time." As soon as he finished speaking, Shui Wuxiang and Xian Jiuyo immediately rushed up to block Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi. However, the 2 of them didn't have the cultivation of a martial Dao Grandmaster, so they were directly shattered by the 2. When they reformed their bodies, their strength wasn't even comparable to the unity of heaven and man realm. However, the time that the two of them bought was more than enough because the array was set up by Shui Wuxiang beforehand. This place was the place where Marquis LV Wenho was sealed. There weren't any materials here, but in these 10,000 years, Shui Wuxiang had been slowly dismantling the formation that was suppressing them. Then, he transferred the materials here and laid down a formation that could resurrect Marquis LV Wenho. Although the formation had been set up, there was a deviation in the plan. No one could guarantee whether LV Wenho could be resurrected. With a wave of Shi Jiuling's hand, Qiao Liandong's corpse was instantly dried up and turned into beads of blood that fell onto the formation below the coffin. Shi Jiuling threw out a large pile of beads of blood and formed a seal with his withered hands. In an instant, a torrential demonic aura filled the sky and a wave of ghostly wails resounded throughout the hall. Chapter 499. As Shi Jiuling triggered the array, the entire hall was instantly shrouded in demonic aura and became extremely cold. Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi's faces changed abruptly and they couldn't help taking a few steps back. After all, that was the ancient demon deity, LV Wenho. Xian Jiuyo had only borrowed a wisp of aura left behind by LV Wenho, and he could already fight them to such an extent. If the real LV Wenho came, how terrifying would he be? At this moment, a large amount of demonic aura gushed out from the coffin that was suppressing LV Wenho. The demonic aura in the coffin seemed to be boiling and constantly surging. At the same time, the blood beads in the center of the array continued to pour into it, causing the demonic aura to surge even more violently. The 36 true martial evil extermination swords that were nailed to the coffin were trembling as well, and it seemed like they could no longer hold the coffin down. In the end, an explosion resounded, and the 36 true martial evil extermination swords instantly exploded. The coffin opened, but there wasn't a demon deity in the dense black mist that everyone had imagined. Instead, a smaller coffin emerged from the coffin. To be precise, it wasn't a coffin, but a humanoid figure cast from bronze. The humanoid figure was burly and wore battle armor, but it didn't have a head. It was as if someone had cast a headless corpse in bronze water. Furthermore, the humanoid figure was engraved with dense runes. If one took a closer look, they would discover that the runes on the left side of the humanoid figure were Daoist runes, while the right side was Buddhist Sanskrit. Since ancient times, Daoist and Buddhist sects had been opposing each other. In the past 1,000 years, the only time that Daoist and Buddhist sects joined forces was when they faced the Kunlun devil cult. However, LV Wenho actually managed to get both Daoist and Buddhist sects to join forces to suppress him. It had to be said that regardless of whether LV Wenho was righteous or evil, he had done it to the extreme. The qi and blood condensed by Shi Jiuling were constantly being absorbed into LV Wenho's body. Gradually, a figure emerged. It was hazy, but its aura was extremely powerful. Even a martial grandmaster like Dong Qikuan couldn't help but have the urge to kneel. Retreat. Dong Qikuan barked and ordered the Dong clan's people to retreat. It was only at this moment when he sensed the terrifying aura that his rationality completely overcame his greed. The things left behind by Marquis LV Wenho were indeed extremely precious, but no matter how precious these things were, one needed to be alive to enjoy them. However, right at that moment, LV Wenho's figure suddenly erupted with countless strands of demonic energy that entangled everyone. The aura was so majestic that it caused everyone's expressions to change. Dong Qikuan and the others quickly blocked the threads, and so did Chu Xiu and the others. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered that those silk threads were almost all aimed at the two martial Dao Grand Masters, Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi, as well as the younger generation martial artists like Chu Xiu. The weaker or older martial artists were not targeted. Chu Xiu's own consumption was not small, but he still directly slashed those demonic energy threads. The power of these demonic energy threads was not small. Fortunately, Chu Xiu had stayed in the tunnel for a while to recover his strength, otherwise he might not have been able to resist them. Moreover, at this time, the blood beads under the coffin also decreased rapidly. This made the expressions of Shi Jiuling and the others suddenly change, and they shouted in a low voice, "Oh no! The power of qi and blood is not enough." Previously, according to Shui Wuxiang and the others' calculations, as long as they killed these 3 martial Dao Grand Masters, the power of qi and blood would be completely enough. Killing more people was actually just insurance. But now, only one of the 3 martial Dao Grand Masters died. Of course, the power of qi and blood was not enough. But now that their strength was right here, where could they go to kill more people? So on this side, Shui Wuxiang directly gritted his teeth and said, "Everyone, sacrifice your true spirits. Otherwise, if Lord Wenhou cannot be resurrected, none of us will live." Shi Jiuling and Xian Jiuyo exchanged a glance, both standing in the middle of the array. The grayish-white flames burned, becoming more vigorous, and the demonic energy threads that extended from LV Wenhou's body also became more vigorous. This time, even Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi couldn't withstand it. They were martial Dao Grand Masters, so the pressure they felt was also the greatest. The two of them gritted their teeth, directly burst out with all their strength, slashed the threads in front of them, and directly fled. Dong Qikuan wanted to save the Dong clan's disciples, but seeing that the situation was getting worse, Dong Qikuan didn't dare to stay any longer. As Dong Qikuan and Su Tingyi fled, the demonic energy threads became more and more vigorous, even Chu Xiu and the others couldn't withstand it. At this moment, there was a slight change in Chu Xiu's expression. This scene was also a little beyond his imagination. LV Wenhou was already suppressed to this extent, so how could he still have such strength? In his previous life, how did Lu Fengxian obtain this inheritance? Seeing that something was wrong, Chu Xiu was about to call out to Lu Fengxian to temporarily retreat, but the demonic energy thread suddenly wrapped around Lu Fengxian, forcibly pulling her into that person's coffin. The strength of the demonic energy threads released by LV Wenhou was actually about the same, but among them, the ones who received the most attention were Chu Xiu, Fang Qi Shao, Ying Bailu, Yan Fian, and Lu Fengxian. Among these 5 people, only Lu Fengxian and Yan Fian were the weakest. However, Yan Fian was a woman, so even if LV Wenhou wanted to revive her, he would choose someone else, and not Yan Fian. Therefore, the strength that Yan Fian had to endure was actually the lightest. However, Lu Fengxian's strength was a bit weaker than Chu Xiu and the others, so while Chu Xiu and the others were fine, Lu Fengxian was pulled into that coffin. Chu Xiu's expression changed, and he wanted to cut open the demonic energy threads, but it was useless. Chu Xiu switched to Buddhist martial arts, and even used the great art of changing sun, but it was still useless. On the other side, Shui Wuxiang and the others revealed a trace of joy. Previously, they thought that Lu Fengxian's body was the most suitable for Lord Wenhou, and now it seemed that it was indeed so. Lord Wenhou's choice was exactly the same as theirs. Lu Fengxian's body was imprisoned in that coffin, and LV Wenhou's bronze body was tightly attached to her body. A misty radiance flickered, and the hazy figure fused into Lu Fengxian's body, causing Lu Fengxian to let out a cry of pain. Just when everyone thought that Lu Fengxian's body would be completely taken over by LV Wenhou, Lu Fengxian's body suddenly emitted a dim light. That dim light was actually emitted by the small jade pendant on her chest. That dim light was very dim, but it was this dim light that prevented LV Wenhou's true spirit from entering Lu Fengxian's body. And when LV Wenhou's true spirit wanted to leave Lu Fengxian's body, that dim light was actually obstructing him. Just like that, the bodies of Shui Wuxiang and the others below started to change. Xian Jiuyo and Shui Wuxiang's bodies became dimmer and dimmer, the black mist dissipated, and the water vapor evaporated. Shi Jiuling wasn't any better. Cracks had already appeared on his bones, and it was obvious that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Moreover, the runes in the entire palace started to flicker, and it was a clear sign that the seal was about to be completely destroyed. At this moment, a skeleton covered in flames ran out from the tunnel, and it was Yan Qishao. The seal had already loosened, and the last chain that imprisoned Yan Qishao also broke. Shui Wuxiang roared, "Quickly come and help us." Yan Qishao also didn't say a word, and directly entered the array, burning his true spirit to support LV Wenho in resisting the dim light from the jade pendant. But no one knew what the jade pendant was, and even with Yan Qishao's help, it still firmly imprisoned LV Wenho's true spirit. At the last moment, LV Wenho's true spirit finally couldn't hold on any longer, and it exploded with a loud bang. "No!" Shui Wuxiang and the others roared in anger, and their voices revealed endless unwillingness and grief. LV Wenho's true spirit was previously sealed in the bronze humanoid, and this thing was used to imprison LV Wenho. But under Shui Wuxiang's control, he had changed the soul-suppressing and soul-locking curse into the soul-accumulating and soul-locking curse, which allowed this array to have the effect of protecting the true spirit. Therefore, LV Wenho only had one chance. Once his true spirit broke free from the shackles, but he didn't manage to seize another body, it would inevitably shatter like this. They had schemed for so long, and finally, someone had come in. Although the process was a little rough, it could still be considered smooth. But who would have thought that in the end, they would be defeated by such an inexplicable thing? But what happened next was somewhat out of everyone's expectations. After LV Wenho's true spirit shattered, it didn't dissipate. Instead, it was still imprisoned by the dim light of the jade pendant, and in the end, it actually fused into Lu Fengxian's body. Lu Fengxian held his head, and a pained expression appeared on his face as he closed his eyes. But when he opened his eyes again, his gaze was very frightening. No one could describe that kind of gaze. It was a kind of indifferent feeling, as if he was looking down on the world, disregarding everything, as if he was a god. But this kind of gaze only existed for a moment before it disappeared, and what replaced it was Lu Fengxian's confused gaze. Lu Fengxian subconsciously waved his hand, and the unparalleled halberd, which was originally repelling Lu Fengxian, flew into Lu Fengxian's hand on its own, and in an instant, a frightening light blossomed from it. Shui Wuxiang and the others looked at each other, and a trace of confusion appeared in their eyes. Did they succeed or not? Lord Wenho's true spirit had shattered, but the shattered true spirit had fused into this boy's body. Moreover, the unparalleled halberd had taken the initiative to recognize Lu Fengxian as its master. What the hell was going on? Did seizing someone's body become an inheritance? But Shui Wuxiang and the others didn't have the time to think about this. They had burned their true spirits, and were only left with a single breath. So Shui Wuxiang and the others immediately made their move. They randomly found 4 weak cultivators present, and pounced on them, occupying their bodies, and seizing their bodies to be reborn. With their current strength, it was unrealistic to find strong cultivators, and they didn't have the time to be picky about height and talent. Their first priority was to preserve their lives. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.